You're reading?
Greetings, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Breakfast Club Jamboree with my co-hosts Rob and Michael.
Yes.
And we will have more hosts as the evening progresses, and you never know who's going to show up. It's one of those kind of things. Greetings, friends. How's your week been?
Rob, you're the best friend. You're supposed to speak first.
Oh, am I?
Yeah.
Hang on a sec. Now
What's happening?
I was having echo issues, and I have a kid upstairs screaming, so I missed it. So okay, wait, hang on, let me catch up.
He's
Let me catch
echoing
up.
across the country right now.
Can you hear him?
Oh, yeah. Loud and clear. Yeah. Like he's in the room.
Through this, you can. Wow.
Yeah.
I am sorry.
That's pretty funny. Shredder lives on. Hello. Shadow's gonna kill you. Hello. And Human Dance is still here. Hello. Michael, you got an interesting title for your name this week, and it's a topic that is bound to come up. So, should we just jump into that straight away, or should we wait for more people to get here and then talk about something more frivolous before that?
Well, yes, I think it's a story as old as time, whereby the conservative rails against some act of sex that he finds immoral, and then he is found doing said act.
Story as old as time. What could you mean?
Well, this happens quite frequently in our neck of the woods, Paul. You might not be aware because you're kind of my new neighbor, but we've had plenty of these stories happen with the mega churches, whereby people have fallen from grace after.
What was that guy name about 10 years ago, or maybe 12 years ago? Even now, is Ted somebody? Was it Ted? He got caught with a rent boy, I think, after in a motel, and Ted. No, maybe I'm wrong. I can't see his face, but
Ted Haggard.
Yeah, Ted Haggard. That's the guy. Yeah. And back in the 80s, we had Jimmy Swaggart and Jimmy Baker as well. Jimmy Baker was, he was just, the fact that he's still famous and on TV in the Christian world, it kind of blows my mind considering everything that he got caught doing. Jim Baker.
Paul, there's something that you should know about Colorado. Out on a farm out east, secluded from, the purview of news cameras, Ted Haggard still has a church that meets in that barn. There are still faithful people to his preaching.
It just goes to show there's one born every minute. That's all I got to say, because
he didn't deny it in the end to his parishioners. He just, grabbed himself a handful of that forgiveness and redemption.
Yeah, and other people paid for it. That's the part that just makes my blood curdle.
Well, also what's really chilling to me is that he's had cameos in Christian movies where they play up the fact that he had a very bad moment in his past. They just allude to it. Gotta love those conservatives who have cameos in movies, like our former president.
Yeah. Didn't you think it was funny about a month or so ago when Trump handed in his Screen Actors Guild card because they didn't want to. I'm not even sure I know the whole story. I just saw what he said. But I was like, I don't want this anyway. Like, dude, as if they're going to offer you any more jobs. I mean, come on.
Fire me, I quit.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Yeah, I'm tired of 4 years of pandering to some guy who is obviously off his rocker. I don't mean to be ageist, but perhaps we should, keep our presidents in their prime. I'm sure he would have been more evil younger, you know, and maybe he could have gotten more evil done, but at least we wouldn't have to worry about the football, the nuclear suitcase.
Sure.
Holy shit.
The minimum age that you can be elected president is 35. Do you think there should be a maximum age?
No, I think it should probably have to do with a mental status exam, possibly at a certain age. You know,
What pick a number?
I'm gonna say 65.
65. Okay.
Yeah. Same age that you would be considered for Social Security sounds like a good age to maybe start checking people for mental deficiencies. There are some states where you can get a driver's license at 18 and not have to have your picture taken again until you're age 40. But thereon, you have to revisit the DMV every so many years to make sure that your eyes are good and everything. But between the age of 18 and 40, you leave people alone. Statistically speaking, you're not going to catch many people that have diminished that much.
Well, when I used to live in California, I know I used to have to get a new driver's license every 10 years. But when I moved to the UK, you get your driver's license and it doesn't expire until you're 70. So, and then you have to go in and do the whole sight thing and, maybe even a hands-on test if you have slow reflexes or whatever. But I mean, till you're 70. So you're not going to look like your picture for a very long time. You know what I mean?
No, you won't have to take your picture again until you're 40. But
about the UK.
Oh, damn.
As I was saying, once you get your license, it's good till you're 70. No, it doesn't matter what age you get it at either. You can get it at 17 or 27 and it'll still last you until you're 70.
Did we give you a driver's license when you came back here?
Yeah.
How do we know you're not going to drive on the wrong side of the road?
You don't know that. I might just do that to fuck y'all up.
We already have too many people from California.
Or to fuck myself up, as the case might be, right? I mean, it's not very safe. It's dangerous enough driving on the correct side of the road.
Yeah.
Especially on certain highways, man. I mean, on the drive to and from California last month, I mean, Christ, the slope between Reno and the bottom of the mountain is just perilous as hell. And people act like it's the Indy 500. It's just ridiculous. But yeah, Shredder Lives On says in the comments, Reagan was showing clear signs of Alzheimer's when he was in his second term. How was he not removed on the grounds of mental health, as Republicans keep saying should happen to Biden? Well, I mean, the Reagan example is one reason for why it probably won't happen to Biden, unless Biden voluntarily steps aside for said reasons. I don't think something extreme would have to happen. I mean, look what we just endured with Trump. Trump had clear signs of decline, and I mean, what's all this talk about how your toilet won't flush for 15 flushes and all that kind of stuff? What's that all about? And there's all kinds of stuff with Trump, having to be escorted down an 11-degree ramp, stuff like that. And make you go, okay, is this guy really got the acuity necessary to juggle the affairs of state and the domestic policy and all that kind of crap?
I can't believe I'm going to do this. I'm going to, not defend.
Are you going to defend Reagan?
No, not Reagan.
Okay.
And defend is the wrong word. But this is like about Trump and the whole toilet thing. That wasn't anything about that was actually genius. That was brilliance, what you saw right there. Because what he was doing is he is appealing, or was appealing and trying to appeal to a very specific audience of people who are pissed off about the government telling them what kind of light bulbs they're allowed to buy, how much water they can use in their toilets. So basically what he was saying is these bad government policies make it so you can't flush your toilet. That's what he was doing. And it won over.
That's awfully convoluted.
It won over. Well, I mean, when you can say, oh, I didn't have this problem with my toilet 20 years ago, and you use 9,000 gallons every time you flush, but now you can only use a half a gallon, and now it doesn't flush. Therefore, the issue is the regulations. So government regulations, that's what that's about. And it works. So.
Rob, I want some WD-40 on your chair.
Hang on a second.
So the Republicans are often about limiting who can vote, voter suppression laws and whatnot, and they're trying to pass more. But the one that they don't seem to be in favor of anymore, even though the conservatives might have been in the past, is tests to signify that you can have the mental acuity to be able to vote. It seems like they know that their base might be the less intelligent side of the political spectrum, and so they're not pushing tests to see whether or not you can vote because maybe they think that the liberals can pass them. It's striking to me that like we have a law saying that you can't have poll taxes or IQ tests at polls anymore because it was used, uh, against African Americans in the South. But if they were in use today, who do you think would be disenfranchised? It might not be the same demographic.
Well, I fully support what happened this week when Major League Baseball decided that they are not going to do their All-Star game in Atlanta. Obviously, it's a bit too late to get Georgia to change their law because it's already been signed in front of a painting of a slave plantation. It's just like the deliberate assholiness of these people is truly astounding. I just can't believe the times we're living in when it comes to this sort of thing. I mean, I actually had thought back in the 90s that, we had turned a corner somehow and that things were, but no, I guess it just went underground for a while, or at least out of mind because I was away. So, maybe I just didn't see it.
Yeah. I tweeted out another instance of police brutality that was kind of swept under the rug that happened last November, and it was just an African American kid who was running to his porch and banging on the door and saying, "Dad, Dad, Dad!" And then the cops came and rushed him. It was one male cop and two female. And there's two instances of brutality in that video that I posted on my Twitter. The first is you'd figure that if somebody's going to use a taser, they're not going to go just full on pressing it down first. They're going to shoot it and have it deploy. The last resort is to use it like a stun gun. But this guy, right off the bat, decided to give this guy a full body massage with it, just all over this kid. It's up and down, right? And then the last part of the video, as the kid's down, you see the female officer taking quite a few kicks at the downed kid as he's still screaming for his father, right on his own front porch. And it was pretty graphic. And just to see that it's being taken down on social media everywhere where it gets posted, where it needs to get out there, just like the George Floyd footage. People need to see it. That troubles me. But also, I'm so happy that Ring has that camera that looks like a doorbell. We have one at my house now, and they did it in full view of the Ring camera. It's not just people having cell phones anymore. It's like the ubiquitousness of home surveillance is catching a lot of shit. And they're trying to pass laws in some states now to limit our being able to video police officers when the Supreme Court recently already ruled on that it is okay to video police officers. It was like a decade ago.
It has to be okay. I mean, it's only logical that you need to be able to sustain your own witness with some kind of documentary evidence. Otherwise it's just your word against theirs. And guess who's going to win that contest? I mean, the only hope you have is having some kind of corroboration of whatever your story is. So, by making it illegal, they're effectively taking away your ability to corroborate your own testimony.
Just before this show, Misty was watching something on our couch where a guy just got profiled in a Walgreens and kicked out of the Walgreens. And basically, one of the other shoppers said, I just saw him steal something at the Vaughn's next door. Right. And so the guy whips out his camera and is like, I wasn't even at Vaughn's. I don't even live around here. I don't even know what Vaughn's is. I just pulled off the highway to go to a Walgreens. And then he waited for the cops. He had his camera out, explained things to the cops. He had the cops escort him over to the Vaughn's to clear his name right then and there. And they're like, no, we weren't talking about a guy with a red hat. We said a red shirt. You know? But the guy was just horribly profiled and didn't get any apologies. And on his camera, he walked over and got the store number of the Walgreens so that he could send it to the Walgreens corporate so that they could see what they did to him. You know, I think that's great that people just have cameras at all times. You know.
Wow. Well, the fact you mentioned a minute ago, Michael, about how, there's so much different forms of surveillance, not just obviously our phones, but, stationary surveillance mechanisms that are even private to us that we control, like the Ring is a good example of that. How much is too much? When does it go too far? I mean, because here's the thing. I mean, if they want to film and use that film evidence against us, then we should have the same right to do it back to them. So there's no way they should ever be able to overturn what they're trying to overturn right now, but it's obviously in the interest of an authoritarian state that people can't video the cops. That's just, straight up.
They're doing the George Floyd case right now, and they are letting the jurors see footage that wasn't given to the public.
Right.
And how is it that the public doesn't have all the footage? Why? And
well, perhaps so that it doesn't compromise the trial. They might want to let it out, but after the trial, because if you let too much out, I mean, there has to be due process to the point where a fair trial has to be given. I don't know how the evidence is so overwhelming. I don't know that the defense can ever really mount a cogent argument for how it wasn't murder. But
January 6th, there is a lot of footage that was shown during the impeachment trial that was not available to the public until after they had aired it there. So
I'm sure there's thousands and thousands of handheld camera videos from that day that we'll never see from the people who were doing it. People who were there. Everybody had their phone out.
Well, there's a ProPublica article where they took all the video that they captured off of Parler. And we do have that. And it's a pretty good swath of all the videos that were probably taken. People sharing their own guilt, incriminating themselves left and right on social media. Got to have those up thumbs.
Yeah. I think Shredder says the same thing as I just said. They can't show every piece of evidence before a trial starts, as it might influence the jury. And I think that's true. And there has to be the perception of a fair trial. So, I'm sure it also helps the prosecution's case that there's some things that the public hasn't seen. So it's a bit more of a dropping a bomb, as it were, onto the whole proceedings. And, obviously the defense will have had a chance in discovery to know everything that's coming. It's not like the defense is going to be caught off guard by, who's going to be called witness or whatever.
So do you think he's going to get off?
Well, I mean, I don't know. History tends to suggest that, but I mean, the only example I can think of recent memory is when what was his name, Botham Jean, who got killed in his own apartment by his neighbor who was a police officer. When that happened, she actually got convicted, found guilty, and sent to jail. But the judge almost instructed the jury not to convict her, but they did anyway. And then the judge hugged her before she left the courtroom. I mean, I don't even know what to think about that other than I find it a bit disturbing. But anyway, that's the only instance I can think of where a cop actually shot someone and is doing time for it. Most of the time they don't even have to go to a trial. So the fact that this has gone to trial, most of the time, DAs don't want to prosecute unless there's a good chance of winning, right? So
This feels like Rodney King to me.
Using that as example is terrifying because obviously I think last summer's marches would be nothing in comparison to what's going to happen if they let this guy off on some sort of, oh, the guy had drugs in his system excuse. I mean, because this is the thing, and I am way not the first person to make this point, but I mean, you can't have it both ways. You can't say he was so doped up, that's what killed him, because that means he wouldn't have been able to be aggressive and fighty, right? But he was so aggressive and fighty that you had to restrain him like that for 9+ minutes. I mean, you can't have it both ways. One argument must be true or the other. You know what I mean? And the fact is, unlike most of these other terrible examples, like Eric Garner, they killed him on camera, and they never had to. That cop never had to face trial ever. That's outrageous, right? Same with the person who killed Philandro. I mean, my God. So the fact that this has gone to trial, I think is a pretty good sign. And the fact is that these cops don't have any excuse, because we have the video of half a dozen or more people saying, stop, you're killing him. He's dead. Look, he's not responsive. And the guy just keeps on doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So the evidence, I think, is so overwhelming. I can't imagine what defense could possibly justify being the operative word here. What happened to George Floyd?
Well, I saw the voir dire of some of the jurors, and it gave me pause. It was like all common sense had to be suspended for them to pick somebody to be a juror. I don't know if the jurors themselves were acting just to get on the jury, but it seemed like they were all saying that there was a chance that they would acquit the guy.
I think they had to say that to get on the jury. If you prejudice yourself, then but I think it might have swung too far the other way, because if you indicated that you thought he was probably did it, then you're out. If you think he might not have done it, then you're in. And I don't know. It's kind of like, well, it's prejudice either way. You know what I mean? To me, so.
I'm not a seismologist, but I feel an earthquake coming.
Yeah, well, I would like that earthquake to be a massive celebration while everybody's jamming to Funkadelic in celebration at the fact that this guy gets justice and gets put behind bars, because this cannot be allowed to stand. Everybody knows it. Even the people involved know it. And everybody knows that all hell fucking, I don't know. If justice isn't seen to be done, no justice, no peace. That people don't say that for nothing, So, yeah. Do you agree with that sentiment, by the way? No justice, no peace.
I've chanted it.
You've chanted it.
I don't like chants. I don't like short phrases. I think they were very overused by Trump a lot. Like, lock her up, lock her up. I don't like the short phrases. It really removes context.
Mm-hmm. Well, every single march I went to when I lived in London, which is at least 24 marches, people are chanting one thing or another, and especially there's some chants that there are many marches, because a lot of marches were sort of against Brexit and pro-immigration and all that kind of thing. So you get a lot of the same immigrant chants, for example, And myself at the time, being an immigrant, I felt quite comfortable chanting those chants, Yeah.
If by no justice, no peace, you mean we're not going to rest until we get that justice, then I'm okay with it,
Marcus makes the point in the comments that never can be justice for the shit the pigs have done. I mean, I actually agree with that in the fullest sense of what justice can mean. Because, like, how do you apologize or get justice for what happened to Breonna Taylor, for example, or George Floyd, or Ahmaud Arbery, or it just goes. Or Philandro is one of the ones that most desperately pisses me off. Tamir Rice. I mean, how come we can make so many? I haven't even come close to naming all the names I could name. you know, and that's just in the past like 10 years. I don't know. You can't get justice for murder is the short answer. You know, you can only try to prevent, you know, save society from the murderer doing the same thing again. You know, there's no justice for murder. Even if you believe in capital punishment, I don't really see how that's justice because the dead aren't being punished anymore. You know what I mean? So
I don't know what I'll be doing should the protests erupt like they did with Rodney King. But I feel like going out with my camera, and now that I'll be vaccinated fully, you know, I feel like it's more responsible of me to go do that than it was. You know, this past summer, I skipped a lot of those protests because I was like, I was torn because I don't want to spread the virus.
right, same.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm more of a hypochondriac than most people. So that was a concern of mine that was very pressing, and now I don't feel that way. So I might just be right alongside them, capturing the moment.
I want to point out a comment in the comment section. It's from Aaron Roberts. George Floyd didn't deserve to die, but he was by no means in the right. Both sides were in the wrong. I respectfully disagree. It's the most polite way I can put that. I don't think there's a side. George Floyd tried to spend a $20 bill that turned out to be counterfeit. It's almost certain he did not know he was trying to pass counterfeit money, right? Because many people, pass counterfeit money without realizing it, including the people who receive the money don't realize it. You know, that's how it circulates in the first place. I mean, so, and, there's no crime that is, I don't know. I mean, like, I don't even really see trying to spend a counterfeit 20 as committing a crime unless you have a pocket full of counterfeit 20s and you're trying to spread them different places. You know, I mean, there's ways you could prove it, that it was, a deliberate thing, but counterfeit money is really easy to get into your pocket without you knowing it. So good evening, Sister Danger. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing all right. Sorry I'm late.
Okay.
The only thing that was illegal that was going on in that, and I think in the best of worlds, George Floyd would probably be in prison right now, and it wouldn't just be for the counterfeit 20, because he did have fentanyl, and that schedule of drug is such that he would still be in prison today if they had not killed him. But nothing that he did should have warranted what happened.
Well, I mean, let me press you on the fentanyl point because I wasn't clear about that before. I had heard rumors about when I saw the original autopsy report. It mentioned that there may have been narcotics present in its system, but it didn't name the narcotics and it didn't say that they were there. It said it may have been. So, was there a further toxicology report beyond that I'm not aware of?
I have read that. But I can find it, further proof to throw in the chat. Just give me a minute. But yeah, there was fentanyl involved.
Okay, because I wasn't sure if that was just one of those like accusations that ends up getting traction because it promotes the argument or whatever for the defense from Derek Chauvin.
I heard that yes, there was fentanyl, and also that suffocation wasn't the cause of his death.
Well, that was one medical examiner's opinion, and that medical examiner is biased because of their employment. And the outside examiner that looked at it was like, no, fentanyl doesn't cause breaks in your neck and your trachea and stuff like that.
Was his neck actually broken?
The trachea was.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I don't know, because we kind of had something of an unpleasant discussion about it here a few days ago, and I guess that because this is what I was told was that, and don't get me wrong, I have no idea how much of this is just some far right BS, but I was told that when he was in the back of the car, he was saying he couldn't breathe. He wanted them to take him out of the car and put him on the ground. They took him out of the car, put him on the ground, followed police procedure, which is to, lean on the back of the neck or whatever like that. But I thought, but didn't that guy like keep leaning on his neck for like 10 minutes? I mean, like on his neck. And I'm like, and during that time, the I can't breathe got worse, and people were like, dude, get off of him, right? And I thought, let's just say all of those things are true. I mean, let's just say all of that's true. Like the guy did want to get taken out of the car, and and who cares how many drugs he has in his system? Doesn't fucking matter. Like, is it really? If that was the case, is that really how you want anybody to die under you? Like, at least if he was in the back of the car just handcuffed and nobody, while they were waiting for the ambulance to arrive, at least it wasn't because you were the contributing factor of having your knee on his neck. You could at least be a little more like, well, he died because he, did more cocaine than Charlie Sheen, or whatever, right? Like, so, like, at once, I don't know. So I guess that I just kind of was like, I mean, it seems like it seems like one of those things that you hear the right-wing pundit talking head people, say that, oh, he wanted to be taken out of the car, and I'm just like, you know what, though, you're damn cop.
I think the police body cams don't show that he was asking to be taken out. I think he was freaking out in the back, so they decided to take him out to calm him down, in quotation marks, and they calmed him all the way down 6 feet under.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I just I just feel like it was there just like one tool in that cop toolbox, which was lean on this guy's neck with enough weight to, I guess, break his trachea or whatever until an ambulance arrived. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all. Like,
Well, I'm looking at the Hennepin County Medical Examiner report, and even he said it was cardiopulmonary arrest complicating law enforcement subdural restraint and neck compression.
subdural, you mean? DURAL?
No, subdural, like he was subdued,
Oh, okay.
and
Right.
neck compression was the cause of death.
Hold on, I'm gonna close
Even
my.
though fentanyl was listed on the report in the toxicology, that was not what he listed as the cause of death. So even the guy that would be most biased listed neck compression.
Well, I know I've said this before in the Breakfast Club roundabout when this actually happened in May or whatever it was. But, I can't shake myself from the opinion, and I know this is my biases kicking in and my tendency to speculate. I know. But, I mean, it seemed to me the two cops on his back, he had Derek Chauvin on his neck, and then there was the Asian American cop standing by, sort of keeping guard. And I noticed that was most suspicious in the footage that I saw was that guy standing there keeping guard was deliberately not looking, even though people were shouting at him to look at what's going on and to stop the police officer. He was not looking. And I know from people who've had experiences with the police that they will deliberately turn one person around while they kick the shit out of someone else, so that person can't say that they saw anything, just as an example. So I think that guy was deliberately not looking, so he could say later, if it ever came to court, which of course it will do, no, I didn't see anything. I didn't see him do any unnecessary force. I didn't see, and he would be telling the truth because he didn't even look. And the fact that he didn't look made me suspect that he knew they were going to kill him. And considering the timing of all this, Ahmaud Arbery, the news was 2 weeks before George Floyd was murdered. Then the week before George Floyd was murdered was Breonna Taylor. And the Ahmaud Arbery murder actually happened in February, but we didn't hear about it for like 6 or 8 weeks or whatever it was later. So there was like bam, bam, bam. And the George Floyd one was like the cherry on the cake, where it just finally, of course, you're going to have an explosion of social unrest. Of course you are. I mean, it should have, should have is the wrong word, but I'm surprised that the explosion didn't happen after Breonna. I mean, she was sleeping in her own bed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the unjustifiability of it is shocking, and
What
that's the same Floyd.
no, what drives me crazy are a lot of the right wingers on Facebook that'll be like, oh, all these people are celebrating and glorifying this man. George Floyd was a horrible human being and he got what he deserved. And it's just like, yeah, I don't know George Floyd. I didn't know nothing about him outside of what's in the media. He may have been a complete and total piece of shit, but we have a criminal justice system in this country, and if you have a confrontation with them, it basically begins at your meeting with the police, and will end with some kind of a decision being made in a court of law. That's the way it's supposed to go. So even if George Floyd was a complete and total piece of shit, he was denied his right, for his process through our criminal justice system. He was denied that. That cop decided right then and there that he was the judge and the jury and the executioner, and that everyone in this country should be pissed off about that. Doesn't matter what George Floyd did at this point. It just doesn't matter.
I completely agree. I personally, I don't know, like I'm with you in that. I mean, people are excellent advocates for themselves and even better judges of everybody else. I mean, saying this person just deserves to die because what? Like, look, even if he was on drugs, even if he was a drug addict, I mean, how many people out there aren't drug addicts because their drugs get prescribed to them? That's what I'd like to know. Because I know one or two, they're just cruising on through life and it's all good because my doctor gives me this, whatever. I don't know. It's getting down on somebody for something like that just kind of pisses me off, but whatever. I don't know. Just like, I don't know. I guess I just hate seeing internet judginess because it's how easy it is to do, and it always is coming from people that if you took a shallow end swim into their lives, you probably couldn't go, you probably couldn't go more than surface deep before you were hitting all kinds of things that you could judge them over, Like,
I just want to address something that CRB Vegas says in the comments. He says, I think most on the right are probably not on the opposite side on this issue. I assume he means the issue of the murder of George Floyd. And I just want to say, maybe that's true. I don't really know, but I do have a friend who has a fiance who's a police officer. And she is absolutely convinced that George Floyd must have done something. Otherwise, they wouldn't have exerted this level of force. And it's not the policeman's fault because he was on drugs and all that stuff. I mean, it's just like, and I'm thinking to myself, come on, I know you're smarter than this, but I don't say that because, but like, because people get trained to view it from a certain vector, and anything that doesn't fit into that tunnel is rejected,
Well, I think that that's a weird position to also be in, though, because if you're related to somebody who's in law enforcement in any way, shape, or form, you're in a tough spot. Those mindsets are kind of all for one and one for all, and right. So if that's your spouse or your brother or sister or whatever, and you are not there all the way, then you are suddenly not there at all. And it's kind of militant and religious a little bit, I guess. That's which is not not really healthy, I don't think, but it's also it's just a tough position. I've got friends that I don't think I have any friends who are cops, but I definitely have friends that work as I have one friend who's been a long time prison security guard, and but he kind of falls in that category. He's all, because they still have to be highly trained in how to use guns and how to subdue people and whatever, because prison.
There's a well-known.
I know we all have friends who are on the right-hand side of the political spectrum, and I've never heard anybody say to me anyway that they think that in person. I mean, except for my friend like I said, who's got a fiance who's a cop. But it was almost like every word she was saying didn't come out of her head. It was like I'm not sure if she watched it or if she's been told it or whatever. But it was literally like it was out of character considering everything else I know about her. Right. So it seemed a bit strange to me. And like I say, I just get trained to look at things from a certain perspective, and thinking outside that box is really hard for some people. But is it true that people on the right think this is an outrageous, excessive force? I don't know. I don't.
My impression of people from the right though is like less that and more that they cling to this idea of I don't know how to word it, but I guess that I want to say maybe kind of this nitpicky of, well, what they believe that the media portrays it to set it up so that it's always showing the cop in the bad light or whatever. And it's like, well, was the cop really the one doing the bad thing? And this guy had drugs in his system, and everything kind of gets reframed, right? So it's not that they necessarily, does that make sense? It's more a question of not was this excessive force, but is the media that is against the cops accurate media? If that makes any sense. Like, it's a subtle distinction, but it's a very effective one, I think.
I'm not sure if the media is against the cops or not exactly.
All they'd have to do to be against the cops in this instance is show the footage.
Right.
It speaks for itself.
I just want to draw attention to a comment from Bugsy's Evil Deeds. Bugsy says, any truth to what I've heard, Chauvin had worked off duty as security for the same club that Floyd was a doorman at? I have heard that rumor. I don't know if it's true. Does anybody here know if it's true?
I've heard the same rumor.
So the implication is that they knew one another outside of their various jobs and maybe had some kind of rivalry going. Is that what we're getting at?
I think that's the implication of such a, if that turns out to be true, then, but I don't know if it's true or not. And I haven't seen it corroborated on a major news network. I've seen it on Twitter. So.
Yeah, I mean, I saw that last year some point. So yeah, again, I haven't had it corroborated, so I don't know if it's true. But if it is true, then yeah, if they do have any kind of history, then that could potentially make it even worse than what we thought it was.
Well, I mean, and I think that might be one of the reasons as well that the guy who shot Botham Jean a few years ago got convicted, is because it didn't seem credible that they didn't know each other when they lived, adjacent to each other.
Right. And the idea that, she accidentally walked into the wrong house and didn't realize it wasn't her place. Like, if I walked into a house that wasn't mine, I would realize right off the bat that things didn't look like they were the right thing.
Especially in her case, Joe, because she had a dog, and as you already know, the dog will be right there at the door every time you come home.
Right.
You're back! Yay! I'm so glad to see you. Thank you. Waggy, waggy, pet me, pet me. That's what having a dog is. That's why people have dogs. Right?
That's right. Like, your whole,
the fact that, I don't know. It's so incredible. But at least she got convicted, Joe. Before you got here, mate, we were talking about whether or not and Sister Danger, you weren't in on this either, so I'd like you to opine as well. Okay. Do you think that what's your over-under on conviction for Chauvin in his case?
What do you mean?
Okay, how likely do you think it is that there will be conviction? If you were going to say like 70% likely convict or 70% likely not convict or whatever, I mean, and how would you make that determination? Because you've seen the same, a lot of the same evidence, right, Sister Danger? That it seems pretty like incontrovertible, right?
Well, it does, but whether or not they get convicted is somewhat relevant to what they've been charged with in the first place. So while he might be on trial, I don't know what the technical charges are that because I haven't read it, I guess. I've only loosely followed it, and I kind of tuned in earlier this week when I saw that the trial had started, but I don't know what the actual charges are. And so whether or not he gets convicted kind of is contingent on what he was actually charged with, because he
Murder,
could have
murder 3.
murder 3. Like,
He's been charged with the three lower forms of murder. He's been charged with manslaughter. He's been charged with murder in the 3rd degree and murder in the 2nd degree.
Right.
For whatever reasons, they haven't charged him for murder in the 1st degree. I guess
because that's premeditated.
On that one. But from my point of view, it seems kind of obvious that they murdered him on purpose. But I guess you can't prove that in court, so they're trying to go for a lesser charge.
Well, murder 2 and murder 3 would be the things. Like, murder 2 is basically an act of passion. So you walk in on your partner having an affair, and in a murderous rage, you kill somebody. That's murder 2. Murder 1, which is what you're saying, and why I don't think why they would have charged him with that, is because that's premeditated. Like, you clearly thought out that you were going to go and kill this person, and they would have to be able to demonstrate that. There's no way they can demonstrate that. It was a cop doing his job. So I guess I don't know. I guess I could see that he would get manslaughter. I'm not sure about murder 2. That doesn't sound like a thing that they would have.
Well, actually, yeah, because the other thing of murder 2 is depraved indifference, where basically your actions are so heinous that it would be obvious that there would be a possibility of death, but you didn't give a damn. So that you were indifferent to the possibility or likelihood that death could occur. So you don't have, it doesn't have to be necessarily a crime of passion. It could just be this guy was, if I go around and I got my axe, my warhammer, and I start swinging my warhammer in a crowd, I'd probably get murdered. If I didn't get manslaughter, I could get murdered too, because the likelihood of hitting somebody and braining them with my warhammer is pretty good. And anybody who has a warhammer knows that. So,
Sister Danger, let me explain to you why I think murder 1 is sort of in evidence by the method of the murder. Okay, because they had the 2 guys on his back and they had Derek Chauvin on his neck, and they were giving just enough pressure to make sure that he couldn't sufficiently inhale. And you need to both inhale and exhale, obviously. And so what they were doing was they were doing just gentle enough pressure to make it hard enough to breathe, that you can't sustain the oxygen that's necessary for your brain, but at the same time, not leaving bruises, not making it look like excessive force was used. They had to use the most gentle form of excessive force they could to try not make it look like murder. You see what I'm saying? If they weren't taking care, there should have been bruises on his back. There should have been bruises on his neck, But
see, the thing is, though, when they say, I like to see what you're getting as far as premeditated, because obviously they're thinking of that. But the legal definition of premeditation requires more forethought. It's usually not something that happens in the moment. It's generally something that's it's not like, hey, I just decided, hey, fuck it, I'm going to kill Paul. It's like, when I see Paul, tomorrow night, I'm going to get him with my axe.
Sorry.
That's more what they're talking about.
To your point about Officer Tao's actions by not looking at the murder, it also kind of looked like he was using his body to obstruct the view of the people who were witnessing it.
Yeah.
To me, that's what it actually looked like. He was trying to make sure that they couldn't see everything that was going on.
It's things like that make me sympathetic when people say it was a form of a modern day lynching, because I do. But the fact is, like, Sister Danger, I think you made the good point. I mean, you need to try to convict him on something that you can prove in court. And if you can't prove premeditation in court, there's no reason to bring that charge, even if you think fits the evidence. If you can't prove it in court, then it's beyond a reasonable doubt. And I think there's always going to be reasonable doubt as regards that. You can't necessarily see into the guy's mind, right? So,
and that's the reason why they included there's the lesser included charges, as they call them, the 3rd degree and also manslaughter, because they want to get him on something. And so my over-under is that he'll probably, I would say, getting convicted on something, probably 75-25 in favor. Getting convicted of 2nd degree murder, I'm only giving it 60-40, 55-45.
What is the state that he's in, Chauvin, that he's being tried in?
Minnesota was where the murder.
Minnesota, okay.
Because
I just want to bring attention to something CRB Vegas said. I'm just not sure what evidence the jury would be seeing that would override what everyone saw. I agree with that as far as evidence is concerned, but the prosecution is going to be relying on arguments and making some sort of twisted legal definition of what actually killed him. Was it the drugs, or was it, and whether they're going to try as hard as they can to blame the police department for training Derek Chauvin to do this. He was just a robot, man. He was just doing what he was told,
So
Yeah.
Vegas gave it 80% chance of murder to. Marcus gave it 20% chance of murder to, and I lean towards Marcus.
I do too.
Because I think in the defense phase, they're going to show police training videos, and they're going to show that Derek Chauvin was trained to do that.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is also is that the way the laws are written in many states, whenever the defendant is a cop, there's a lot of bias in favor of a cop, which is kind of messed up in a way if you think about it, because if anything, the fact that we grant them this extraordinary power, and that if they abuse that power, the law should come down on them, I would say harder than it comes down on the average person, because that means they've abused that power. But if you think about the Amadou Diallo case, you think about Diallo was the one that got shot 41 times, and basically the cops pled, we were scared, and the way the law is written in New York City, if a cop has a reasonable belief that his life could be in danger, that's good enough to blow people away. At least it was at the time. I don't know if it's been changed. So sure, a reasonable person could believe that, maybe he was dangerous, but that could apply in almost any case, which is the reason why cops almost never get convicted, because the law is written with the thumb on the scale in their favor. So, that's why I'm not as optimistic about murder too, even though I think it's cut and dry for me. If I'm on the jury, he's baked, but I'm not on the jury. You muted, Paul.
Talk to me. You got to unmute.
Sorry. How uncharacteristic of me, right? To actually have myself shut up. Anyway, Sister Danger, have you or would you ever serve jury duty?
I would serve jury duty. I've only ever been called in to do it once, though.
Were you selected?
No, I was not.
I think if you don't want to be selected for jury duty, George Carlin has the best possible out, because you just have to sit down and say, I can spot guilty people just like that.
Or you could just say, I watch the news religiously, and they will basically vet you right the fuck out. So, no joke.
Most of the times when I've been called, before they select the first panel, who's going to be voir dire, usually like in New Jersey, like in my county, you go to the county courthouse. They ask you what your profession is, and at most of the times when I said engineer, they're like, bye, go away. The last time I got called, they didn't do that, and my number was way near the end of voir dire, so I didn't think they were going to impanel me, because they were only going for a 7-person jury because it was a civil case, and it took all fucking day. And every time you thought that they had their slate of 7, then one of the lawyers would kick 3 people off, and they have to do it again. And they actually ended up finishing just before me. I was like the 5th from the last person to be selected, able to be selected, and they stopped 2 people before me.
I've gotten 2 postcards asking me to do jury duty, both of them after I had moved out of the county where I was being asked to do it. So all I had to do was write back, actually, here's my new address, and I can't do it.
Take it back. I've been called twice to do jury duty.
When my grandfather was in his 60s, he got jury duty a couple times, and I think he was actually the whatever you call the juror who reads out the thing, is the head juror or whatever. Anyway, the foreman, I guess. Yeah. Anyway, and in one of them, it was a murder trial, and he told me that he was a bit like torn, because he didn't think that the prosecution had proved the case beyond a reasonable doubt, but he also just got the feeling from reading people that this guy had definitely done it. And what do you do in that situation, right? Because you're not supposed to go on your gut feeling. That's exactly what you're not supposed to do. You're supposed to go on the presentation of the evidence. Right. Taking that into the George Floyd example, I hope that the prosecution isn't relying too much on emotional presentations to try to use emotion to sway the jury, because then the defense might come back and say they've tried to push all your buttons and blah, 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 and undermine everything with some probably convoluted argument to you know, why this is all political theater and all that kind of crap.
Well, I mean, another reason for the manslaughter charges, because as we've already seen based on the cross-examination and what's happened in the media, the defense is pushing the whole, well, George Floyd was on drugs, he had bad health, and all this kind of stuff. So that's why manslaughter is there, because it's like, well, manslaughter is like, well, you know, you weren't intending to kill somebody, but you still, you know, you have to understand that there are people in the populace who have problems. So, you know, the fact that, you know, maybe it was accidental, but you're still on the hook, because it was reasonable to expect that you would understand that someone might have a heart condition or might be on drugs or might, whatever, you know, various. There's who is it? Legal Eagle did a video on this, and he actually there's actually a legal principle that I don't remember the name of, unfortunately, but it's basically the idea that the potential victim is made of glass, effectively, and you have to, you know, treat him as such.
Yeah, that's an old trick. I just want to bring attention to the Green Machine's comment. I don't see how the prosecution would need anything more than the video. I thought the same thing when the cop strangled Eric Garner on camera, and he said 14 times, I can't breathe, and then watched him kill the guy on video for selling cigarettes or something like that, and didn't even get a court case. The DA threw it out, and you know, stuff like that is so blatantly outrageous. I'm surprised that people don't march more often than they did last summer. I mean,
well, again, like I said, in New York State, you know, the way the law is written, it actually didn't. I mean, granted, the DAs also tend to favor the cops anyway, but the law in New York State is written in that way that kind of took at least a certain amount of that out of the DA's hands. So that's why it's so fucked up. That's why I never want to get near a cop anywhere in New York, because it's too easy for them to kill you and not face any kind of consequences. One thing I want to get real quick, who is it that said it back here? So Shredder lives on, talking about Mark Furman and the OJ case. You know, the OJ case is a case where the police tried and failed to frame a guilty man and fucked up their case because of it. Because I have no doubt OJ did it, and I also have no doubt that at least some of the police tried to frame him up. So
that's exactly right. The gloves, you know, I mean, Johnny Cochran said, if the glove don't fit, you must quit, and that's exactly right. If you're saying these are the gloves OJ killed her with, and they're literally 4 sizes too small for his hands because he's, you know, a big football player. So, right. You know, so they had to acquit him. And OJ, I mean, you know, talk about the complete lack of sense of irony. I mean, OJ, didn't he write a book about how he would have done it if he was guilty? I mean, how tone deaf and idiotic is that? You know, you don't brag about how you should have killed someone. You know, if you've been acquitted for something that you probably did, it's time to shut the fuck up.
Yeah. Well, it's a thing, and the other thing too is like some of the blood evidence. There was the issue that, you know, it had preservative in it when it shouldn't have, and all that kind of stuff. So that's one of the reasons why I'm like, So I'm like, yeah, I'm convinced the police framed him, but I'm also convinced that he killed his wife and the other dude.
Yeah, same.
It really sucks if the cops hadn't done that, because they created the reasonable doubt, right? So,
whose audio is whistling? It's a whistle. It's like,
I don't know.
I'll mute myself just to see.
There it is.
Haha.
Try now. Is it whistling?
Is it whistling?
No.
It's my audio that's whistling?
Yeah,
I believe so. While Joe is talking, it's whistling. Yours is whistling like crazy.
Weird. What would make that happen?
That's a bit weird. Don't know. It's one of them technical things, you know, the age of the internet and all that. Anyway, so before you and Joe came on, Sister Danger, we were talking about what might happen in our land of the free if Chauvin gets acquitted. What's your thoughts?
I don't know. I've given some thought to it, to be honest, but I mean, I would like to see outrage happen because I kind of agree with, I like Green Machine. I kind of agree, like I don't, I've seen the videos and I just don't see how it can, it isn't clear that. So I would like to see something outrageous happen, but at the same time, I guess I just also I don't have the confidence in people to continue to take up that
What about you, Joe?
banner.
I think that there will be mass protests. I think there will be some destruction of property. I'll tell you right now, if he gets off and doesn't get convicted on something, at least the lowest charge, then the next time anybody says to me, "All lives matter," they try to do back the "All lives matter" to me in the face, I'm just going to punch him in the fucking face because clearly not. There was some guy today that he had responded to some Aaron things, and then Aaron replied to me on my post, and then so this guy started commenting. And it's YouTube, he's some atheist shithead who thinks he's a critical thinker because he's an atheist, but he's like obviously right wing and stupid right wing, not like intelligent, conservative, just a fucking moron. And he actually posted, what about white lives? Don't white lives matter? And like, yeah, that was never. He's like, my lives matter too. I'm like, yeah, that was never in question, dipshit. That's the whole fucking point of saying Black Lives Matter. We're not saying only Black Lives Matter or Black Lives Matter more. It's that we like some evidence that you believe that the rest of society believes that Black Lives Matter, because so far the track record is really fucking poor. So, if this guy gets off on this, then clearly America doesn't give a fuck about us. In which case, then, when someone says all lives matter, like, you're a liar, and I'm just going to punch you in the fucking mouth. Simple as that.
Wow. Well, obviously, to me, back when all this all lives matter, blah blah, people were retorting to the Black Lives Matter when Black Lives Matter was newer than this. I mean, not long after Ferguson, right? And people were coming, yeah, all lives matter and all that. And I'm thinking to myself, there's no contradiction, and I don't know why you think you're making the point. If I say I love the color red, that doesn't say a goddamn thing about the color blue. It just means I love the color red. It doesn't mean I hate the other colors. It just means I love the color red. Right. If I say Black Lives Matter, it doesn't mean I have any opinion about everyone else. It just means I think Black Lives Matter. And I don't understand why that's so fucking difficult for some people to grasp. They don't want to understand, I guess.
No, they don't. And it's been explained to some people dozens of times. I've seen people that I personally have explained it to several times, still, not only misunderstanding it, but like making declarative statements that basically tear down BLM to the idea that it's a black supremacy statement or some bullshit like that. It's like, no, this has been explained to you. You don't have any fucking excuse for misunderstanding at this point. Now it's deliberate, and I can't take that you just don't understand now. You just want to fucking push us, and it's just like, again, as far as any kind of violence, I keep making the point. People, somebody that today was trying to compare the January 6th people to BLM. I'm like, well, when the people that rioted on January 6th, they haven't been getting killed by agents of the state en masse without any accountability. They just didn't get their way. And so to compare the two is like, no, we've been under siege forever, for the whole fucking time we've been in North America, to varying degrees. It's not like it just started last year. It's just been going on for 4 fucking centuries, and we're fucking tired. No, I don't give a fuck. And I should try not to. No, people should try not to be an asshole and try to marginalize my life and all that. And so I'm not putting up with this shit anymore. I'm just not.
Joe, speaking of what you will and won't put up with, Wayne Watley of the Breakfast Club may be coming in later, and he almost certainly will be here next weekend. So brace yourself, buddy.
Oh, I had an interaction with him today.
Okay, well, there, you know who we're talking about then. So everything's fine. Yeah. Anyway, no, personally, if Chauvin gets convicted, it's not just that there's going to be massive protests all over the country. It's not just that. It proves that institutional racism reigns for all time in the United States. Because if the evidence can be as overwhelming as it is in this particular instance, where not just video evidence of the murder itself, but people begging the cops to stop, including other first responders. I mean, it doesn't get any more intentional than this, as far as I can see. He didn't give a fuck that he was squeezing the life out of that guy. So he either didn't care or he did it on purpose. Those are the two possibilities. It was not a fucking accident.
Yeah, and it's clear he was from the look on his face, he was defiant. People told him stop, and he was, well, I'm gonna fucking do it, huh?
Yeah, I'm a cop. What are you gonna do? You know.
Yeah.
People and power. You cannot give it to them. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. It's like somebody has to be in charge because you can't have, society without law and order, as it were. But it's.
Well, that's exactly how I feel about it, Sister Danger. I mean, I personally think that you need some kind of civil law enforcement of some nature that is actively realized, I suppose, varies from country to country. So it doesn't have to be the way it is in America, right? And I don't know. There's plenty of things about the British example that I think are bonkers. But at the same time, I mean, the fact that most people in the country don't have guns and most of the cops also don't have guns just makes the cops, your relationship with the state, of a completely different nature. It's really that simple. Every police force in Britain has an armed response unit, but cops don't walk around with guns. Unless there's like a high terrorism alert, you might see some at the train stations and airport and stuff like that. But most of the time, you won't see cops with guns anywhere in Britain. And I really, really strongly feel that that's so fundamentally changes your relationship with. I mean, you can have an argument with a British cop, and they're not going to kill you. You know. So yeah.
Well, that's the thing, even when I do see videos from people in Britain where the Brit cops are maybe a little bit out of hand, but you're right. If somebody mounts off to a cop, you don't have the case where cops like how that they have that idea that how dare you respect my authority, smack and I spent now about a month in England. And I never felt unsafe once. And I've only saw, other than the airport and the train stations, I only saw police like once or twice. And I never ever felt like I was in peril from the citizens or the cops.
I've been to Amsterdam twice, Joe. And I've walked around Amsterdam at like 3 o'clock in the morning. I know 4 different people who've been mugged in Amsterdam, right? But personally, I felt it was one of the safest cities I've ever been in. And out of 2 visits to Amsterdam, which were both 3-day weekends, I saw 1 police officer. 1. And that was it. It's a capital city, for Christ's sake. You'd think there'd be cops around. But the thing is, the cop cars don't look any different to a normal compact, except they got a little red stripe of reflective tape. And it says police about this big on the back. That's it. So maybe I did see cops and I just didn't realize it.
Well, the thing is, postal people are chill there because everyone's high.
Only the foreigners are high in Amsterdam, man. Yeah. Sister Danger, have you ever been in Amsterdam?
Not in any meaningful way, but technically, yes. I had to fly through Amsterdam to and from going to and back from Romania.
You're on the show and working at the
Yes.
same time.
What? Yes, I'm on the show and working at the same time.
Sister Danger, when you were in Romania, did someone want to drink your blood? Or what?
No, not that I can remember. They actually consider Vlad Tepes kind of a national hero over there. So there's all kinds of stuff to do and see, like everywhere you go. And it's actually it's kind of a little bit funny because can be pretty touristy sometimes. Like the first hotel I think we stayed in Bucharest literally had little bats, vampire bats that were like encased in acrylic, like with their wings all spread out. You could buy them for like $40 or whatever, and I thought that was kind of funny, like there was all kinds of things. And I went to see there's a where were we? City Shora, and there is the house that Vlad Tepes was born in. And you can see the room he was born in, which is, in fact, yes. And I say this because it's funny how they do it, but like it is actually the real place that he was born. It's the actual historical site, but it's so corny because you go up there, and before you go in the room, there's like an outer and ante room. And there was a dude in a coffin dressed like a vampire. And when you would go in, he would be like, and jump up at you with like a goofy Halloween sound.
And I know for a fact you wanted that job, didn't you? You wanted to be that person who comes out and goes,
as it turns out, I thought this was so funny that I just asked that guy if, dressed like a fairy as I was, I could get in that coffin, and he told me yes I could. Got out of the coffin, they put me in the coffin, closed the bottom half of it, and I took a picture like it's the dumbest thing, but I was like, look what I did, man, this is funny, this will make great video.
That's a great story. I just want to circle back to where we were though, because Shredder made a good comment which I really have to address. Shredder says, you haven't been keeping up with the new legislation over here, have you? Got that fun? We're having protests outlawed and overwhelming new powers granted to police. I am certainly aware of the protests that are in danger of being outlawed, and that is basically fascism 101. I was not aware of whatever new powers the police are being granted. That's also scary. It sounds kind of scary anyway. So I'm not as up to date about that as I should be. My son told me last week though that the right to protest is basically about to be vanquished, and to me that doesn't even feel like Britain, because I never went to a protest until I lived in the UK. In the UK, I went to like a couple of dozen protests, because protesting was accessible to me, and issues mattered to me. So shutting down protests, as far as I'm concerned, is, if not fascism itself, is certainly a step in that direction.
Okay, well, I have a feeling it may not pass, although it looks like the first creation of the bill was back in December, but there's lots of people protesting. So now I want to actually see what it says myself, because I find, generally speaking, when people react to legislation, it's often they're usually wrong one way or another. It's either worse or better than, or not as bad as they say. So I don't see what it actually says. But there's certainly the fact that there's lots and lots of people protesting tells me that at least there's a possibility that it will get blocked or modified before it's passed.
Well, the fact that they're even trying it is disturbing enough. I don't know. It's the same with the Georgia voter suppression laws. I mean, they're passing laws that they know are probably unconstitutional and definitely partisan. And it just blows my mind that these people who are elected supposedly in good faith, they don't even pretend to operate in good faith anymore. I mean, they don't pretend to be representing the interests of the public anymore. They're interested in shoring up their own power and making it harder for us to get rid of them. So, yeah. Rob, you've been awfully quiet.
Yeah. Just a lot of these topics are they're beat to death.
Right.
They're depressing.
Well, let's talk about one that we haven't talked about yet, which is the one that's on Michael's name, Pizzagates, because this week it has been some explosive news about how Matt Gaetz was apparently transporting minors across state lines to have sex with them while getting them drunk and giving them ecstasy and fucking them and then paying them money. And I'm not sure
who was doing this.
Matt Gaetz, congressman from Florida, who is one of the biggest Trump sycophants you can think of.
Oh my God, what a freaking shocker.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, there's so many accusations that if even only 1/3 of them are substantiatable, he's doomed. I don't really think that the whole. I mean, Trump had this strategy that you just double down and you triple down and you quadruple down and you never apologize and you never go back. But I think some Republicans are trying that, but I don't think it will work because they're not Donald Trump and they're not the president either.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, he keeps talking, and the more he talks, the more guilty he sounds. Because, like, for one, he keeps referring to the one woman, one person as a 17-year-old woman. Which, no, 17-year-old, you're still a child, you're still a minor, and so the fact that he's already kind of acknowledging that at least one person in the story is underage. Now he's claiming they didn't actually have sex, but we've heard that before too. But I want to say, dude, what the fuck are you doing hanging out with a 17-year-old?
But he's also up to his neck in this whole thing about some sort of fake ID scandal that this other guy, what's his name, Derek. I want to say something, but I could be wrong. Anyway, there Green. I don't know. I can't remember now.
Greenberg, I think.
Yeah. Anyway, there was this other fellow who was, involved with this as well. And apparently, according to the rumors on the Hill, people have been waiting for Matt Gaetz to be exposed for some time because, of course, people know. It's not as if the people don't, the Congress people don't know. It's just they won't talk about it because everybody has secrets, right?
Yeah, Green. One thing about age of consent, though, in most states, for people that are minors, there's usually a limit on how old the other person can be. For instance, in New Jersey, the age of consent is 16, but if the person is 16, 17, basically under 18, then the other person can't be more than 4 years older than them. So a 16-year-old and a 20-year-old. And so that's to allow for the whole thing of like, okay, you were boyfriend and girlfriend in high school, and then one person goes off to college, and so they're not criminalizing those relationships. But if someone, they're trying to keep young people from being exploited by someone that's much older than them.
Deep Ashtray asks, in all seriousness, is anyone surprised? Surprised that he's been caught. Maybe a little bit. Surprised that he did it. Nah.
Yeah. I just do. What's wrong with people? I mean, really, what is it? What is it? Like you just like these dudes. Why is it? Why are there so many dudes
Power
that are out there with clicks that are? I mean, of all the things, of all of the things. And all the money that you have, you can't just like at least pay for a high-end prostitute that looks like she's 15. Do you have to actually go for the 15-year-old girl? Well, I mean, whatever. Like, what in the hell is wrong with people?
But unfortunately, it's fairly widespread. I mean, think that even in popular music, there's that song by Warren, "She's Only 17," and there's another song, "15 Gets You 20." I mean, somebody had to be thinking about that in the first fucking place to come up with those songs, right? And
there's loads of them. Okay, I'll do you better than that. There's Ringo Starr. She's 16. She's beautiful and she's mine. There's that one. 16.
So,
she was only 17. That's the Stray Cats.
In
17 by Rick James. I mean, that's all about jailbait.
Yeah, but in some states, 16 is the age of consent.
Sure, 16 is the age of consent in the UK as well.
Yeah, in New Jersey, 16 is the age of consent.
Right. But again, don't forget though what I was just explaining before. A 16. If you're over 20 and you go with a 16-year-old, you're still statutory rape.
Joe, you were thinking about Winger.
Yeah. Okay, Winger. I knew it was something with a W.
Yeah. Some
hair band from the 80s.
Warren did Cherry Pie, which is also about
an underage. Yeah. So
So
yes, right. So here you go. That's 3 songs. Yeah. Well, plus we know that some of the famous people that died, back in 2015, 2016, that everybody was, gaga over. They, back in the 70s had underage girls. And people look the other way. It's just like people who still carry water for Roman Polanski.
I think Joe's feedback is Joe. By the way, it's not me.
Possible.
Well, I don't know. Are you getting any feedback from me now? Everybody else is I'm not hearing any feedback at all. Might
Yeah,
be
but
mine.
it kind of happens when you get on a roll, though. So maybe try getting on a roll about something.
Okay, well, I'm gonna everyone mute themselves, and I'm just gonna babble, thinking about different things and all this stuff I said before, and stuff and things and stuff and stuff. No, not hearing anything.
Okay, but no. So as far as Matt Gaetz is concerned, Michael, what do you think is the thing that's going to drag him down? What's the one thing that, like, that's the brick that's going to be around his neck that's going to take him to the bottom?
You know, I don't know that he's going to go down criminally, but I do think maybe politically he might be toast, and that's maybe as good as we can hope for.
Good enough for me.
I'll say that it's not just Trump that does the whole you get caught, so you just keep on doubling down. It's narcissists,
Right.
you know, and it's not good for me to be diagnosing people over the internet like that, but holy shit, narcissism itself is becoming normalized in the Republican Party.
Yeah.
To get caught with something and then just keep on doubling down and saying no, it doesn't exist.
Well, I mean, Matt Gaetz is the epitome of a entitled, privileged Republican. I mean, his father was a successful politician for some time. He served in the Florida State House for some time before he became a national representative in Congress. And he's had every advantage in his life. And going to the point that Sister Danger made a moment ago, I mean, look, you've got all this stuff going for you. Are you really going to risk everything you've got, everything you accomplished, and all the potential that you could potentially accomplish because you just had to have sex with this 17-year-old girl on ecstasy? You just had to take her to a different state to do it. I mean, seriously, the risk-benefit calculation doesn't make any sense, and that just goes to how entitled he is.
Well, and that's the problem. Like I said, why it's kind of a sign of people in power, because think about what brought the mob down in New York and Philly was basically, the old mob. The guys used to like be low key. They would do their thing, their extortion and all the different crime they were into, but they didn't flaunt it. Then you had guys like Gotti and the guy in Philadelphia, Jimmy, whatever his fucking name was, and they basically were tweaking the cop's nose, and the cop, even the cops that were bought off were kind of like, "Hey man, you're making us look bad." And eventually they had to come after them, and that's why they went down. It was hubris, basically. It was hubris, and that's what extreme narcissism is. I guess leads to hubris, maybe.
Well, I guess it's not hubris if you don't get caught. It's not hubris if you win.
I think there's a whole very dangerous mentality that's set into our culture. I'm not sure if it's always been there, or if it's just getting worse, or maybe I'm wrong about it completely. But it seems to me that there's a mentality that, if you got away with it, therefore it's okay. Almost doesn't matter what it is. If you got away with it, then even God doesn't know, right? I mean, yeah.
Well, I think, Paul, it started in the late 60s, when basically, people started for the first time to distrust the government openly, or large numbers of people started, because of the Gulf of Tonkin, because of the Kennedy assassination and the bullshit Warren report and all that. So I think what ended up happening is because you started seeing the growth of the anti-hero. And so the anti-hero, they don't follow the rules. They're on the good side, if you will, ultimately. People like them because they're on our side. But they do a lot of bad shit. But we look the other way, Charles Bronson, Death Wish and Dirty Harry and all this kind of stuff. The guys that, you can't be successful following the rules. You have to break the rules to get the bad guys. And once we started accepting that, and that became a bigger thing, that's most of the heroes now are guys who basically don't really follow the rules.
Well, what's your over-under on Matt Gaetz? I mean, okay, there's the two things Michael just mentioned a minute ago. There's his political death, and there's his criminal liability. What do you think his likelihood is that he's going to have to step down from his congressional seat? And then what do you think the likelihood is that he's going to see a day in court?
I think without one, the other one won't matter. I think that if he goes, oh, sorry, who was being asked? I'm sorry, I just decided.
No, everyone, you go ahead and start. It's fine.
No, I think that if he doesn't actually get convicted of anything seriously, that that there'll be a flare up and then it will die out like last week's news with regards to Congress. So I just there will be well, yeah, but he wasn't found guilty, so, and then people will just forget about it if he isn't, criminal charges don't go through.
See, I see the other way. I see that his political career is probably going to end, but I think I could say like 80-20 in favor of him, losing his seat or quitting. But I think
he was Florida though, right? He's Florida.
Yeah, Florida. But as far as doing prison time, I think it's more 20-80. And this is that thing that a lot of politicians do, though, right? They like, well, I'll quit if you don't pursue me, with legal charges, and we usually let people get away with that shit.
Forget about conviction. What do you think about the idea that he might go have a day in court?
Nah, I don't think so. I would think
Rob?
Maybe 30-70.
What about you, Rob? You've been far too quiet for far too long.
Isn't that a song? I have no idea. I don't know. Fuck Matt Gaetz. I hope he gets hit by a truck. I mean, seriously, somebody in a big heavy truck could solve a lot of these problems.
Oh my dear. Oh dear. No, I mean, no, Matt Gaetz is extra deserving of both ridicule and consequences.
A big heavy truck.
And a big heavy truck. Michael, you volunteering?
No, I have a career ahead of me. I think we should each take our turns, jumping on that grenade for justice when the time comes. But I feel like I still have some things to do in other realms. And when I'm completely done doing those things, then I'll take my turn.
Well, I think if Matt Gaetz survives this both politically and from a criminal prosecution standpoint, there will be nothing to stop the most wanton and disgusting acts of depravity and corruption hitherto yet unimagined. Because if you can get away with this kind of raw daylight, knows you've done it, and he basically admitted it. Right? Oh, they're just trying to extort $25 million out of me. Okay, that means there's truth to it then, right? I mean, they can't extort you if you didn't do it. You can just go do your worst, if you're innocent. But
well, I mean, basically, and this shows, it does show the level of depravity that the Republican Party has fallen to, because basically Fox and all the Republicans are still at least at this point, I mean, they're kind of being a little sheepish about it, but they're still defending the guy.
Mm-hmm. Deep Ashtray makes the comment that he's already talking about a job at Newsmax. Pretty soon we're going to run out of ex-Republican politicians because they're all going to be on Newsmax, or Fox. I mean, Katie McEnany's on Fox now. That's about as surprising as the sunrise, Given
his crimes that he's been charged with, I think he might want to hold out for a higher position at the new Trump media organization. I'm a career counselor.
I mean, the funny thing is with that Trump media thing, it's going to be a boondoggle like literally everything else he's ever fucking done. It's just going to be a big scam to get money from financing sources, and then it'll fall by the wayside, and they'll blame other people.
I don't know. What really makes me angry is that this kind of scandal is another way that the Republicans are using sort of grievance culture, which they seem to have cultivated quite successfully, to fundraise, save Matt Gaetz from this attempt at blackmail or blah, 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 whatever. And it's frankly, I think, disgusting and maybe even unethical. I don't know.
Both. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of shocking. I mean, I've never, at least in my lifetime, the Republicans have always sucked to some degree, but yeah, they're in a cesspool that's so deep, it's virtually impossible for them to actually get out of it, because anyone who's not part of it gets attacked now. So like Lynn Cheney had at least a little bit of integrity, and they're attacking her for it. Now they're attacking. Trump's attacking Lisa Murkowski in Alaska. basically, suggesting that they're going to have somebody else, try to primary her out for her seat. This idea that there's a fight in the Republican Party, I keep seeing articles that it's Mitch McConnell and the old time conservatives versus the Trumpers. That fight's over. That fucking fight's over. McConnell can continue to wage the fight, but it's kind of like the Japan after Midway. Yeah, they fought on for a couple more years, but the writing was on the wall.
It's an interesting example. I don't know. I would like to think that they're swinging so far to the right that they make themselves unelectable. But I don't know. It really depends. So many things depend on what happens in the next sort of 12 to 18 months regarding their, master of ceremonies, Donald Trump, because as long as he remains sort of unindicted, either in New York or Georgia or any place else where they might be investigating Trump, probably New Jersey, I would have thought. But wherever they might be investigating, and we know that indictments are going to come down at some point, and the national reaction to that will set a tone for whatever election follows that, whether that's in 2022 or 2024.
They're coming soon because, all the preliminary stuff's going through court now, and Trump and his team continue to lose those battles to try to stave off the court cases. Because he's basically trying to argue, like, well, I'm the president. Like, no, you're not the president anymore. All that defense of you can't charge a sitting president stuff doesn't apply anymore. And he just lost the battle in court a week or so ago on those grounds.
Have you all seen about how the Capitol Police are suing Trump for inciting the insurrection? What's your over/under on that one, Rob?
I think it's going to go good for them.
Is it a civil suit?
I think that's going to go good for the cops. I do. So, and good for them too. Yeah.
Right. Well, someone has to do something. The impeachment didn't accomplish very much, unfortunately. I suppose it accomplished that we all got to see just how much evidence there was and how obvious it was. It's just the fact that it wasn't a conviction is awfully frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny for the Republicans now because, they love to act like they're pro-police when, of course, we know they're very selective about it. And so now what do? If they want to, wave their blue line army flags, and now there's cops saying, hey, this guy got us hurt and injured and killed, and we're going to have lifelong debilitating physical and mental injuries because of this. So they're in a tough spot because if they criticize the cops too hard, that's a big part of their base. And so then what? What do they do then?
Man, I was not listening to anything Joe was saying. I literally was just reading an article on this lawsuit. Sorry. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think I agree with Rob that I think that the cops they're going to make some hay out of this, because again, the people who end up on juries tend to favor cops.
So there's a lower standard of proof that's required for a civil suit, which suing him for this is. And so I think with that lower standard that Rob is right. This will definitely go in their favor. I guess I feel that also there's enough sentiment thinking that Trump, the Congress literally went through, a whole second impeachment rigmarole, right? And he just basically walked off the set like, so I think that this may have a cathartic effect for a lot of people that feel like more should have been done, that he should have actually been impeached. And I don't think that sentiment is gone. And since it's really easy to sue somebody, essentially, And since he has like a mile-long list of people that are always suing him, then that probably doesn't work in his favor. Just, because who can unknow that, right? So I don't know. I think you're right. I'm irritated by this. I'll tell you what I read in this article that irritated me though. Blasingame, who is one of the police officers, quote unquote, is haunted by the memory of being attacked and of the sensory impacts. The sights, sounds, smells, and even the tastes of the attack remain close to the surface. And I read that sentence, and man, the first thing I thought was about all of the protests, all of the people who for months and months last year, in Portland and all around the US that were protesting and were getting hit with all of these sensory things. But people are like, well, they're non-lethal weapons and this, that, and the other. But when a cop talks about it, they're like, this was devastating. And that's basically what everybody was saying. No shit. Like, non-lethal, who gives a fuck? That does not mean that these things are not severely hurting people, right? And so it's like, oh, feel bad for the cop because, all of these sensory impact things, but fuck those protesters, right? Like, like there was just like this, I know it wasn't meant to be like that, but boy, that was the first thing that came to my mind, was, yeah. So anyway, I'm done.
Well, I'm not even sure where to go from that. I don't know. I think that like we've got it. Like if Chauvin gets let off, we're going to have a summer protest. So there's that one thing all by itself. But there's plenty of other reasons why things are going to kick off. I mean, all these Trumpers, they still, there's a whole bunch of them. There's a small army out there that are brewing. I mean, we had the guy kill a couple of Capitol officers the other day just by, running them down and then trying to stab them and whatever. And, they took him out, which I think in the current circumstances they had to do. Having said that, we can't, it feels to me like it was like someone testing how soft the perimeter was. That's what it kind of felt like to me. Like a scout almost, like a martyr scout. And so I do get worried because I think I've been saying ever since January 6th, these people aren't done. They're not done.
Well, Paul goes back even further than that. What happened in Michigan, 6 months earlier, that was a test run as well. Because they actually got session, the Michigan legislature to like close session for 2 days because they were concerned that a bunch of armed wing nuts were running around the Capitol building and the police wouldn't even stop them. So yeah, that I remember normally I agree with Bo of the Fifth Column, Justin, but when people were saying that they thought that was a dry run and he said no, and I'm like, nah, actually it looks now like that really was. Right. I wanted to see what would this response be. Would the cops open fire on large numbers of armed people, running in, or would they, use restraint? Wow, amazing! Imagine that the cops used restraint. Interesting how they don't use restraint on unarmed people, But yeah, that was they wanted to test the waters, and they that's why they did what they did.
Well, it's not just last summer. When Barack Obama was president and there was the Occupy protests, that's when I really started going off Obama, for me personally, because like all this stuff was happening in Obama's America and he seemed more or less mute on it. It's like, well, that's not his problem. He's the president. That's for law enforcement to deal with, blah, blah, blah.
Which protests?
The Occupy in 2011. And I saw countless examples of police using excessive force, whether you might call brutality or not. Or, like, for example, people would come with gas masks on their eyes so they wouldn't get, tear gassed. And the cops literally ripped them off their face and from 6 inches away, spray a big canister in their fucking eyes.
Yeah. I saw one where there were a bunch of people that were sitting on the ground, their legs crossed and their arms linked. And yeah, cops just went up with them, and just like, shh.
I saw that same footage.
And they weren't hurting anybody. And it wasn't even like they were really particularly blocking the way. You could easily go around them. But,
right.
So it was respect my authority,
So between Occupy and then the 2020 protests for George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, justice for George and Breonna, I think the examples are already pretty well established that the cops will exceed their authority with little consequences already, and
qualified immunity.
Yeah, and so what I really worry about is, if Chauvin does get acquitted and it kicks off this summer, we've all of us have expressed some sympathy with it. If it kicks off, well, what else can happen? When you make peaceful progress impossible, violent progress is the only solution, right? I mean,
well, what if I've said
totally against violence?
If the people in power that your opposition won't accept reasonable measures, then unreasonable measures are guaranteed. And here's the thing, and again, I'm not for this at all. I think this would be a horrible tragedy, but I really believe that if he gets off and there are protests and the police act heavy-handed again, I think people will start slaughtering cops. I really do, because I think people are going to well, fuck it. We know we can't get any justice in court, and they're just going to start killing them. And that's horrible.
Which is pragmatically really possible, I suppose, but it's terrifying because that is essentially the breakdown of law and order right there. That's the end of civil society as we used to know it.
Yeah. I don't know if I agree with that, actually.
I suppose it depends on how widespread it is, wouldn't it? I mean, if it's in the city, then it's not a problem. But if it's all across the country, Sister Danger, don't you think that's kind of like the end?
No.
Okay.
I think if our military, if our National Guard suddenly became neutered somehow, such that they couldn't be mobilized or whatever, then maybe we might be looking at something like you're describing. But really, I think that the existence of cops is far more relevant to their being seen than their actual doing of coply like things when it comes to mitigating crime. So I don't think it's I think at most it's only the breakdown of the appearance of law and order, because that's what they are. They are the appearance of law and order. They are not actual law and order, because we don't actually have that. I mean, compared to the populace, that much crime.
But it's already happened. You know what I'm saying? The what if that you're saying, or the what it would take to be considered a breakdown of civil society, has already happened. There were police officers that were basically being pinned down and attacked by protesters, one of whom had a heart attack because he was being tased. Basically, they're trying to tase him to death. And another one that was killed that day, and since then 4 or 5 had died. So I mean, that already happened, and on top of it was the military was unable to be mobilized to defend against it because the military had been neutered on purpose. So the very scenario you're saying has already happened.
Yeah, but it's not happening wantonly and in an ongoing fashion. It's happening in a targeted way. So I guess that what I understood Joe to be saying was just that it would become a free for all. I don't.
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that, so right now,
against cops, that is.
We know during the George Floyd protests that we know the cops. A lot of cops were heavy-handed and used excessive force. Ironically, here we are protesting against excessive force by cops, and they go out there and use excessive force. So what I'm saying is that instead of people that were throwing rocks last time, I think some of them will be firing bullets, because I think that what's going to happen is people are going to say, well, what's the point? We know we can't get justice if a cop does something wrong, so people are going to start taking it into their own hands. And again, that's horrible, and I don't want that to happen, because you're right.
Like in a free for all.
I don't think that a free for all, but it's still a bad thing. The thing is that, and that's the irony though, because the people that are now trying to draw the comparison between the two, saying that BLM was just as bad, but the thing is, they're actually okay with what happened on the 6th, but they're not okay with what happened with BLM. So it's kind of like, well, if you're saying they're equal, well, you either have to like both or neither if they're actually equal. But yeah, what happened? You know, like Rob said, what happened on the 6th was a breakdown of order, but it was just by right wingers. So. You're right. The current government will not neuter the National Guard because the current government's not interested in, at least at the moment, not interested in engaging in a coup against the legitimate government.
Well, I'm fundamentally against violent protests. But having said that, there are instances when I understand it. For example, when Rodney King thing happened, I mean, that was not even surprising to me. That what happened when those cops got acquitted, not surprised. It doesn't mean I think the riots should have happened, but not surprising.
So sorry, go ahead, Amy.
Can you think of a time where, in history, where it has not required the literal uprising of people to overthrow the powers that be in order to effect the sort of change that we talk about there being needed?
Well, I mean, if you look at the protests in the 50s, 60s, and 70s for civil rights, it's funny because a lot of people like to, they were trying to tell the BLM people, well, you should look at what Martin Luther King did. I'm like, well, there was a lot of civil disobedience and a lot of the unrest during that. It wasn't violent. The police made it violent, but it wasn't intentionally violent. But yeah, they blocked roads and blocked bridges, and they blocked store counters, and they boycotted bus lines, and they stood in the road, and they did all sorts of stuff, shit, because it's the only way to get attention. If people, that's why I always thought it was disgusting when Bush II was in office, and they had these free speech zones far away from the sites where protests would have mattered, like when the conventions were going on and stuff like that. They have free speech zones like 2 miles away from the actual event. Well, that's fucked up. Like, yeah, we have some right to control where protests happen and when and all that. But when you're literally shunting people to a point where you've rendered their protest irrelevant, you're effectively taking away their right to seek redress, because you've made it so that no one has to pay attention to them.
In defense of Bush II, I can remember in 2008 a free speech zone that was erected for a Democratic National Convention.
I was against that too.
And also, there's a free speech zone in Seattle next to the Pikes Peak Fish Market. Amy might have seen that one. And it's often being used, at least, and it's where people walk by. But usually when I see a free speech zone erected around a political event, it's usually far away from where people are walking into the event.
Yeah. And the problem is that, left, right, or center, generally speaking, this is one thing I'll agree with the right-wing libertarians on, is the government continues to try to, or people in government continue to try to seek more and more power. And if they are unchecked, that moves the line, and the next time they'll look for more and look for more. So that's the one place we'll agree. And so, yeah, I didn't like free speech zones under Bush, or at least the way they were implemented. And I didn't like those other ones you mentioned either.
Oh, I mean, the very term freedom zone is contradictory to itself, and when Trump was president in the last couple of years of his presidency, and they kept on talking about how they wanted to create these opportunity zones in America. I thought the whole of the United States was supposed to be an opportunity zone, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, but see, economically, it's a little bit different. Like, we have some enterprise zones here in New Jersey, and they generally put them in areas of that are badly in need of economic development. So it's basically what you're doing is say, okay, we're going to reduce or remove the sales tax in this area, or some of the other corporate taxes, to encourage people to invest in these areas. So it's not really this comparable, I don't think.
Mm. CRB Vegas is joking. Big L libertarian, Joe. I guess you said a really important fundamental libertarian thing there. Well done.
Well, like I said, well, that's the thing. I mean, well,
It
it's
happens
kind of
once every full moon, right?
yeah. Well, it's kind of like saying, you know what, Hitler was good to dogs, and that doesn't mean I'm a Nazi, you know.
Sure. Well, I mean, I did this political test on the internet I think it's called the 8 Values Test. I think it's an interesting one. The questions are deliberately loaded, just like they are in the political compass test, right? And you know, it's really funny when you watch people do videos about the political compass or the 8 Values Test, and they're always, you know, oh, this question's leading because, yeah, dumbass, that's the point. It's supposed to be leading, and therefore, if you disagree with it, that says one thing. You know, anyway, the 8 Values Test. I did it, and I came up socialist libertarian. And when I've said that to people, sometimes they say, well, isn't that a contradiction in terms? And I'm like, not if you understand what you know, in other words, no, but the dogma about what libertarian means and the dogma
and social means,
you know, they sound on the surface incompatible, but they're really not.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, you know, the only problem I have with some of the tests is the ones I've taken always say that I'm more liberal than I believe I am. So, you know,
that just goes to show you where the middle is. The middle's too far to the right then, isn't it? If a big lefty, Joe, then we're all in trouble.
Well, and what's the end? That's the difference. Well, you may be right. Actually, you're right. The middle is to the right, but see, that's the difference between the middle and the center, though. And that's something I've said before, is that the center and the middle are not necessarily congruous. They should be in an ideal world, but they're not. When that Overton window moves, and particularly if you have one party that's way out there on one end, the middle becomes to the right of center. So that's why I think sometimes when people put these memes about what centrists would do, I think that, you know, they're vaguely, you know, comical, but they're also stupid because they're not what actual centrists would believe. They're what the false militarians would pick, you know.
I had an idea. You were just this is completely off top. All right, I'm sorry, but you said Wyoming, and you reminded me of something I've been meaning to say, because Wyoming has what, 500,000 plus, maybe 600,000 people in it tops, right?
The smallest population in the United States.
Yeah, even Alaska, I think, has more people, right? And yes. Alaska is pretty sparse. Anyway, we need to invade these fucking states. It's really simple. There's land that goes begging. You know what I mean? Have you driven through Wyoming? There's nothing for miles.
It's beautiful, and the roads are
gorgeous. Are you kidding? It's absolutely stunning.
Yeah, Wyoming
is why people should live there more. You know what I mean? I think people should move to Rawlins. Rawlins is a nice little town. They should make it a bigger town. And there, it's just liberal invasion completely. We need to take over some of the small states because when I lived in California, someone who was voting in Wyoming, their vote was 3.5 times more powerful than mine when it came to the Electoral College. And that's not okay. You know?
I'm laughing, Paul, not because I think you're wrong. I agree with you, but because I made a video exactly to this effect for the Breakfast Club about 4 years ago.
Oh, right.
And I caught hell from a lot of people, but you know, yeah, it's true. I mean, you know, if you take those small states with low populations, it wouldn't take that much to really, you know, some states, you know, 50, 60, 70,000 people would change the dynamic of that state entirely.
I'm just going to use round numbers to explain my point because Sister Danger, you looked a bit vexed. Is like, is that really true? About 3.5 times the vote? Let me explain.
Oh, I probably looked vexed because of something that I saw in the comments. I was reading Vegas's comment. So,
but no, I mean, okay, here it is in a nutshell. When you're in California, there's 55 electors up for grabs, right?
Right.
And California has 40 million people. About I can't remember the number of people who vote, but it usually tends to go Democratic, right? So the 55 electors all go for the Democrat. But let's just say for the sake of argument, is that 20 million people vote, right? So that's 20 million divided by 55, and then you get how many voters it takes per elector, okay? If you do the same calculation for Wyoming has just over 250,000 people who actually vote. So let's just take a round number of 250,000. That means it takes 125,001 votes to get 3 electors. So each of those electors only took 40,000 voters, whereas it takes hundreds of thousands of voters to get one elector in California. So,
I mean, I'm not against going to Wyoming or Montana. Montana's beautiful. I just, as long as I can achieve what my goal is for.
right. Well, what is it that you do where you are that you can't do in Montana?
Oh, it's not that. It's more about where I find to do what I want to do. So,
Right.
I like Washington because this is where I was pretty much born and raised, and also the weather here is awesome and beautiful, and the landscape is awesome and beautiful, and there's everything. But also Montana is amazing. Northern Idaho is amazing, but it's stupid expensive because Sandpoint and Coeur d'Alene. But Wyoming is also quite beautiful. Been down through there a few times, going to and fro from Sturgis, actually. So, but yeah, I think my things that rule stuff out are I don't want to live someplace with high humidity, because I despise humidity. Colorado wouldn't be bad, I guess, because I'm totally. Why are you even letting me do this? Like, I am just like off on a tangent now.
Wyoming and Utah are pretty dry, I thought. When I was there, I was just, but anyway, but to whoever said about this, liberals couldn't live there because of no Starbucks. I'm like, liberal entrepreneurs would open them. They would.
I mean, also true, but I mean, I can absolutely vouch for the fact that that's one of the things that always pains me when I travel is coffee, because I have a severe coffee addiction. I have my whole life. I do not care. I love coffee. I will continue to feed my addiction happily, but it definitely means that if I go for 24 hours without having coffee, I will get a raging bad headache that only caffeine can cure.
Well, and here's
all the ibuprofen. Or
Michael, did you just hear that?
I did just hear that.
Well, see, the thing is the lack of
my cup changes colors.
The lack of good coffee places in Wyoming just goes to prove what I've always said about how libertarian economics don't work. Right wing, meaning right wing libertarian. That this idea that, well, if there's a need, the market, the free market will always respond. I'm like, well, no. And that's the reason why a lot of smaller rural communities are underserved for lots of services, because it's just not economically viable to open something up to support such a small population.
I think that I feel like that really on the political scale, I fall in the libertarian category more than other things, but I am unconvinced that society can work on a libertarian platform. While I think that it is maybe the best philosophy that there is out there with regards to, individual rights and other such things, I'm unconvinced that that's how people behave and act and can coexist with one another.
Well, I think if everybody in the world agreed, and the simplest and best way to do things would be anarcho-communism, right? But that's totally against human nature and can never work.
Well, and it's also unworkable because
I don't agree with that.
Without some sort of body to make sure that the resources are distributed properly, then they won't be, because we live in a world where resources are not evenly divided on the planet as far as the ground and on the air and all the water and all that. So that's why you need at least a minimalist state for that kind of to ever work.
Right. Well, what I said was, everybody would have to agree. I mean, you can't have a communist society if people don't want to be communist.
Well, even if people did agree, I mean, the problem is that, I've talked to people who have there's the anarcho-syndicalist and all this kind of stuff, and it's like, well, how do you prevent, Syndicate A that happens to be sitting on a really valuable resource not end up, whether they wanted to or not, with more power than one that didn't have a valuable resource? If they have nothing to trade or whatever, how do you enforce to make sure that A gives up their excess to B? Because human nature is to hold on to what you have. Because, well, what happens if I run out? What happens if there's an emergency? What do I do if I give away what I have? I don't have it anymore, and then now I'm screwed. And I don't think you can defeat human nature. I think we can make human nature better to a degree, but I think it's literally impossible to go to that level. It's the same reason why anarcho-capitalism won't work, because we already know that won't work. We have a hard enough time with it now when it is regulated to some degree.
Right. Well, I mean, civilizations have risen and fallen and risen and fallen, and each one's had a different way of going about it. And some civilizations have lasted considerably longer than ours has so far, right? I mean, if you just want to take from, say, the Industrial Revolution onwards, I mean, it might prove to be the case that the only sustainable way for humans to live is an agrarian lifestyle. But while we're having this experiment with technology and industry and everything like that, but if your system isn't sustainable, it structurally has to fail. Joey, you say this all the time. If a machine is a machine, it will break someday. It just will. And it's the same with a system. If you, in democracy, if the people, meaning me and you and everybody, if we aren't contacting our representatives to tell them what our interests are, we're not doing it right. You know what I mean? It's not just a matter of voting. It's not just a matter of marching. You need to activate your representatives, because trust me, if you're not calling them, someone else is. You know?
Well, this is part of the exchange I had with Wayne today, because Wayne's taken a very anarchist kind of view of, and basically he said himself he's cynical. He said he has the attitude, well, if you vote, if you participate, you're part of the problem. I'm like, no, because whether I participate or not, the things are going to continue to happen. So I can either try my best to exert whatever level of influence I have to try to make that result be better, or if I can stand back and just let shit run, we know that's going to lead to chaos. So I find people that are cynical, that don't participate, to be the biggest part of the problem, and I have visceral fucking hatred for it. So
the world is never changed by people who don't do anything to change it.
Exactly. I mean, it's kind of like, what's his name? Josh, Meridian Frost. He was mad, in 2016 after because Bernie wasn't the guy, and he said that he wasn't going to ever vote again until we had ranked choice voting and Medicare for all. I'm like, well, how the fuck is that going to happen if everyone has an attitude like you? They will never have that. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you want something, you have to stand up and be engaged. And the problem is again, it's not just Americans, but especially Americans. We're lazy, and not only physically, but we're mentally lazy. Because to actually understand these issues, you have to spend time looking into them, and people aren't willing to do that.
I sometimes wish I was a little. When I was in California, we didn't have any TV or internet, so I had a whole month with no news, except for what I would occasionally look at on my Twitter, right? And it does sort of, in one way, it's kind of a relief, but in another way, I mean, what if I came back to Colorado and it was countdown to nuclear war because I didn't know what was going on? You know what I mean? It's just like I would have felt really, really bad. So I'm glad that didn't happen. Obviously. But yeah,
right. There's a difference between being in a transient situation and not being able to keep up for a while. But you're pretty up on stuff, Paul. We got this show every week. You're constantly asking the questions, and you're constantly, you're an activist, and you do as much as you can. You try. I mean, no one knows all of it, and no one can keep up with every bit of it. But the people who don't bother and who say it doesn't make a difference or it doesn't matter, it's like they're the ones. I consider them leeches, because they basically will take whatever we put out there, but they won't put anything back.
How come you don't see them? How come you don't perceive those people as the very human nature that you earlier said you can't fight human nature? This is why I don't think that ultimately like a libertarian philosophy would ever work, is because people demonstrate certain types of behaviors. That behavior of I don't care, I don't have enough time for this, or whatever it is, that is the human nature. People want to be told what to do. They want to know where they stand in society, and they want to not have to navigate conflict as much as possible. So, I mean, basically, as long as they're entertained enough and able to meet all of their basic needs enough, they will continue on in their life complacently forever. And they will.
You froze.
Oh yes, you froze.
Oh, sorry. Where did I leave off? I'm sorry. I saw I froze right
Stay in
there.
that place forever.
Yeah, because it will be very hard to motivate them to uprise, because they will know that the thing that is on the line is their otherwise peaceful life, that they had enough food and water and, you know, some basic health care, and they were entertained enough, you know, or whatever. And that will be what's on the line for if they want to complain about it. And most people are not going to, they will complain, but not complain to the point that they want to actually take up arms and fight for something, right? They don't want to actually risk it, but everybody wants to bitch, right?
Well, I mean, the thing is,
But that's
it doesn't even have to come to taking up arms. To just pay attention to what the fuck is going on a little bit, and they won't.
but why my point is that I question highly whether or not even the paying attention that you're talking about is actually not really in the nature of most people to do. And that's why they don't.
And that's why I have contempt for most most of humanity. Seriously, I really honestly do. Because a lot of people, most people don't even understand the process. They don't even know, like, if you ask them, like, how do you vote in a primary in your state, or what's the, you know, and they've done studies on this, on how many, do they know how long the term is of someone in the House or the Senate or the president? And they have no fucking clue. And they have, you know, in their pocket, they have access to everything humanity has ever learned in the history of ever is in their fucking pocket. So there's no excuse anymore. That's what I get pissed about.
But there is an excuse, I guess. The excuse is that there's no need for them to do it, and that is the state that they want to live in, where there isn't a need for them to have to worry about those things, by and large.
They self-absolve themselves.
Like, people, they don't want to. They want to know that they can go about their daily life doing their thing without too much disruption, without too much change, without too many hardships, right? But that doesn't mean that they want to necessarily be involved in the bureaucracy of making that happen. People just want to be safe and cozy and happy, not bored.
True, but even a lot of people who consider themselves activists are, you know, I would say probably about a third of people that consider themselves activists are just as clueless, maybe more.
And the only way you get to the point where you can just like live your life is if you're involved. Do you know what I mean? Like you have to do the work before you can like relax, before you can sit back and relax. You have to do the work. So if you don't do the work, and your neighbor doesn't do the work, and their neighbor doesn't do the work, and nobody's doing the fucking work, you end up with the fucking shit show we've got.
Right. And it's the thing, and people do complain about it all the time. Right? So they do the studies, and people are unhappy. They hate their job. They hate where they live. They hate the whole situation. But what they do is they use the excuse of, oh, it's too big for me, or oh, it doesn't matter because it's convenient. So they take that easy route out. And you're right, that's what they do. But it's infuriating.
But that's exactly my point. Is that is what their true human behavior is that they'll complain about the thing and whatever, but they won't actually pick up and do the things to change, because that in actuality is more work than they really want to do. So when we look at how do we govern society, I'm unconvinced that actually, like, the grand American experiment is in fact a successful way to go. If you look at all of the, look at the Roman Empire, look at Alexander the Great, look at fucking Genghis Khan. I mean, how, like, in all of these societies, and granted, I mean, like, some of these people were like just pure, I'm going to chop all your guys' heads off, right? But in all of these places, the people know where their place is distinctly, because there were classes in all of those societies, right? So you had your lower, middle, and upper class, and everybody dealt within those classes. And there wasn't any confusion about the fact that your ruling class was literally doing basically whatever they wanted, but also they did that because of them and their money. Everybody else doesn't have to worry, like I don't know. I mean, yeah, of course they have to worry to some degree, but those societies that lasted the longest, that's kind of how they were. I guess I just wonder, are we not really going against human nature by trying to make everybody be involved when that's not how people want to be?
Human nature is to act in any way that they're taught to act. Like there is no such thing as this is strictly human nature. What were you taught as you were growing were priorities. And that's what you're going to act on. That is going to be the nature, human nature. So if we're talking about adults, that means we're talking about a society that stopped valuing getting involved, that
Right.
stopped valuing government, that stopped valuing things that we claim that we value in this country.
One
It's
political party actively doesn't like government.
yeah, I mean,
Right.
we're not like we're not. I mean, yes, obviously we're scientifically speaking, we are animals, but we're not like wild animals living out in the jungle who follow our instincts to do everything. We act. Our behavior is based on what we learn.
Right.
I
Well,
wish I believed that.
and the fact that they do it better for the most part in the Western European democracies says that our way is, there's a better way than what we do. So the fact that, that maybe it's not human nature, because in other places, the voter participation is much higher. They have a better standard of living, better standard of healthcare than we do. So I reject the notion that our current state here in the U.S. is all out of humane nature.
I would respectfully challenge the notion that a stratified class system makes a society more stable. In the same, because the societies that were stratified like that lasted a long time. I don't think that necessarily follows, although I kind of see what you mean. But all struggles toward liberty have been an effort to break down such systems. So so there's that. Plus, also, I mean, the greatest experiment in eugenics that's ever been done on Earth is in the caste system in India, which prevailed for thousands of years. And aspects of it linger to this day. But they had very stratified society, and as you say, everyone knew their place.
Are
right?
are they working to break down the stratified system, or are they working to bring some level of equilibrium to the haves versus the have-nots? Because it seems to me that whenever those systems actually become challenged to the point of storm the Bastille, what's really happening is not that people necessarily want to see the system go away. They want to see the injustices that they perceive as wrought by that system equalized. And once those become equalized, it doesn't matter what the system is anymore. It only matters.
But see, the thing is, when people stormed the Bastille, they literally wanted the system to go away. So that's a bad example.
Yeah, yes, but they don't just want the system to go away. Like if you would have replaced that system with something completely like a different system, but that kept everything the same, they would have done it again. Because what they're not really protesting the system, they're protesting the results of what they think the system is doing. And therefore, if you want different results, then you change.
But they're not.
I think that's semantics. That's you're arguing from the opposite side of the same thing. But I mean, the longevity of a system prevailing in a culture is not justification for the system. I mean, slavery being the most obvious example of that. Most of human history, people have had slaves. Most of human history. So it doesn't follow that because something lasts for hundreds or thousands of years, that meant the system was functional or
That's not my argument, though. I'm not.
I know it's bad form from my point of view to use an extreme example to make a point. I get that, right? But everybody knowing their place. I don't want my place decided by someone else. I want to decide my own place. I kind of thought that was the whole idea behind it.
And yeah, here's a quote from Tim Minchin: "Just because ideas are tenacious doesn't mean that they're worthy."
I love that song. That's a good Christmas song.
Plus the fact that as far as the Romans go, well, the Roman Republic lasted slightly less than 500 years. It was not stable the last 100 years, and then you had the Roman Empire, which was never stable, and eventually collapsed under its own weight. So they had a heavily stratified society, and yeah, it didn't last.
Certainly lasted longer than America's been around right now.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean it'll last longer than America will last, though.
My point, though, is that I'm not arguing for a style of government. What I'm trying to get at is that these things give us insight into what real human nature is, and that the people who will control and run society will recognize that what real human nature is, and they will not try to fight that. They will try to go along with that. And I mean, so here, listen to what you just said, right? You said, I don't want my position defined for me by somebody else. Well, what that means is you don't want to think your position is being defined for you by someone else. It doesn't matter whether or not it actually is being covertly done. As long as you perceive that you can make your own free decision, then you'll be happy, because that's it doesn't matter whether or not you can actually make your own free decision, right? It only matters that you perceive that. And so people that will run society will be those who recognize how people actually behave, and they don't try to swim up current of that. They try to ride the wave. They try to surf it, and thereby seize control of it.
I kind of agree with what Rob, well, I actually strongly agree, but what Rob said earlier about how, it's how we raise our children, that determines what a culture is. And, that's one of the reasons there are different cultures, is because people raise their kids differently. It's just true. And I don't know how to solve it, because, you can't tell someone you can't have kids until you take parenting classes or some shit like that. Or can you? I don't think classes are the way to go. So, I mean, how do you solve the problem of all, especially in the United States, where you have so many different cultures feeding into one culture? How do you solve the problem of disparate ways of raising kids, and therefore there's no sort of like a unifying common philosophy? I mean, in America, we tell ourselves it's the Constitution, but as recent events show, that's all bullshit.
I think we start by not letting anyone's kids get raised to be Raiders fans.
I just wanted to say, like, Sister Danger, I completely disagree that the wealthy and those that are in power kind of go with the flow of human nature in order to take advantage of people in the lower classes. I would say it's more that they manipulate circumstances in order to guide those in lower classes to places they want them to be, so they can easier control them more easily.
But that's what manipulation is. It's, I mean, good manipulation.
But they're not going with the flow. They're manipulating the people under them. They're taking away their free will in order to maintain their own status. That's not going with the flow.
Well, here's a good example.
That's the exact opposite of going.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
I have a friend who was in China during Tiananmen Square happened, and he was an economist. So he said that up until Tiananmen and a little bit after that, everybody pretty much believed whatever the government said, because the government controlled the information. So yeah, the society was fairly stable because people literally didn't know any better. They didn't think there was anything else better out there, because the information that was controlled, that they had access to, told them that what they had was the best that was around. But then after Tiananmen Square and after other information started coming in, and then the internet, he said later, he says, now very, very few people believe what the government tells them, because they know that the information that they're given is almost certainly like not true, or not or inaccurate, or not complete. So so now people are different, and they act and behave differently. So it's not that human nature changed, is that human nature reacts to the knowledge that they have available. So way back when we were more savage than we are today, we had very top-down hierarchical systems, and we had slavery and all that. And then eventually people learned that that wasn't really fucking cool. So I mean, Because otherwise, to be quite honest with you, because if we wanted to believe that that we can't get any better, I would fucking kill myself now. I really would. Because what would be the point? What would be the fucking point?
Well, I find you entertaining. Not good enough. I get it.
Nope.
It's not my shirt. I actually steal the clothes from the dudes around the house as my way of showing dominance. It's not their clothes. These are my clothes. I'll wear whatever I want. So, like, do you think this is yours? I'm going to put it on right now. It's sort of like taking food off of other people's plates, right? Like,
Sister Danger, does it work? Have you established dominance in your chamber of
I don't know. I mean, I guess that depends on what you
I find that incredible.
I think that depends on what your definition of those things is.
Dominance, having superior position over others, with or without their consent.
Well, I would prefer that it was with folks' consent. So without their consent sounds like a very not healthy situation.
No, let's not embrace existentialism deep. I would rather slash my wrist. Yeah, I mean that's the thing. I mean, existentialist kind of conversation. I don't think we really ever have that, but those are like the most tedious things ever. Like solipsists are even worse. Then I just every time I see a solipsist, I'm like, can't just shoot me, please? That's just easier.
I'll get my coat.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, it's like it's important that like we all understand, the limits of what our knowledge are, and understand epistemology is, how do we know what we know and all this kind of stuff. But the people who continue to engage in those same type of things over and over and over are the most tedious people I've ever met in my life.
Been nice knowing you, Joe. I love you, brother. I love you. I'm that guy.
No, you're not.
Heartbroken.
I find solipsism more interesting than existentialism, to be perfectly honest.
I think they're both mind numbing.
Nihilism is dumb. I mean, I think they're kind of useless, like in terms of. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Pizza Gates, but I mean, like in terms of arguing, like why are we here and what's the meaning of life, they're useless, right? But in terms of exploring other things, not as useless.
I mean, even I was I got invited to a discussion last week, and I sat in for a little bit. And then it was all the usual word salad and people started well is this person like this philosopher or that one? I'm like, yeah, and I stayed for like 6 minutes and I was like my desire to live just kept going down and down and down, and I said I gotta bail because I hate life and everybody in the conversation.
That is like my kind of conversation.
Yeah, that's why I'm an engineer and not a philosopher.
Well, see, I can have those conversations until dawn. You know what I mean? I mean, I go round and round and round and round, and I can quite honestly, I can bore the fucking scales off a lizard. So,
Sister, do you think that you're the only solipsist here?
That's funny.
Well,
to be perfectly honest, I don't actually have proof otherwise. So.
I mean, I actually got into a conversation with somebody he was a hard solipsist. And I'm like, okay, so if you actually are a hard solipsist, you're literally telling me that I don't exist, and you're arguing with me a construct that's been projected at you. So you're actually having an argument with an entity that you don't believe exists.
At least you get it, Joe. At least you get it.
How tedious are you if you honestly believe I don't exist and you're arguing with me? How fucking dumb is that?
Even narcissists have to have philosophy, okay?
Yeah, I guess that's what it is, right? Solipsism is philosophy for narcissists.
I think it roots from the same place. I don't think they're equal to each other, but I think they come from the same basic, I am special, therefore, I exist because I'm special, I guess. And we come from that same sort of root.
And what I've always said as far as solipsism go, I'm like, I hope the fuck that it's not true, because I mean that means all the shit that I've experienced in my life was either I created or some other entity has been funneling into my head. And if it was me, Jesus Christ, couldn't I have come up with something better? And if it was somebody else, I want to figure out how to get out of the matrix so I can punch them in the fucking nose, because that means they invented child molestation.
One time when I was particularly high on LSD, right, I came to the realization that
According to her.
we're all in each other's dream, right? So that is solipsism, but it's not, because it's
It's
like the Matrix.
It's
the
communal
center is
solipsism.
everywhere, right? So
It's communal.
I
It's
can't.
communal solipsism.
I tried to do this with Kazum, and it was hard enough.
So the ancient Toltecs had a sort of, I don't know, philosophy saying whatever, an idea amongst their society that to look into another person's eyes is essentially essentially the universal soul or God or whatever you want to call it looking at themselves.
Right.
So and this is actually in line with a bunch of other different various cultures saying things like God or the universe wanted to be able to observe itself, and thus people were created. Like thus it divided itself up essentially so that it could have contrast.
I think it says in the Quran, I can't get the quote exactly right because I don't have my Quran to hand, but I think it goes something like, I was a hidden treasure and I wanted to be known, therefore I created the world so that I would be known. You know,
it's the same principle, yes. Which the reason I find it interesting though is because I feel like that's not that far off of, like, solipsism is a very refined version of that idea in some ways, right? Like if you were to think about, what Joe was saying, that like I'm just the imagination of somebody else, or vice versa, or whatever, that falls in line, in a much more logical, philosophical way with these, I don't know, kind of more esoteric, wise man types of sayings, and I guess that to me, I find in life, I find where the overlap is, where the spaces in between things are, that is the interesting part. It's not the actual thing, it's where it overlaps with other things that are similar to it, or where by having these things defined, you can now see what the center is. I find.
I don't know what any of that meant.
Hey, Joe.
It's not just me.
Oh, that's kind of funny. Anyway, I don't know. We don't have to wax philosophical. I think we're going to bore Joe into slumber, waxing on philosophic.
I'll cut it short and say what we need to do is send Paul back on a DMT trip to bring the answers back to us.
I'll go with you.
Sister Danger, have you ever tried that?
I have not. But
right.
acid was like my drug of choice way back in the day. And now mushrooms are pretty much, because acid like really can strip you out. But mushrooms are so chill. Like they're always happy. You can go to sleep at night. You wake up. You're like, yay, life is good, And but yeah, like back in the day, acid was it, because it made me think like just extra hard, I guess. Like you just really, really rabbit hole and your brain goes a bajillion miles per hour. It's also probably why I don't like pot, like at all. Most boring drug ever.
That's funny.
Yeah, I haven't done it. Well, I did marijuana in college, and of course drinking, but alcohol is too depressing, and marijuana, I just find I got dull, and so I didn't do it anymore. I'm not against it, maybe as to take the edge off, but
I personally, do you remember back in the day when blog TV was a thing, and there was this big thing about fake Sagan did LSD on his blog TV, and it was like some really big deal, and I'm like, I don't know. To me, it's not fun watching someone else be high.
True.
That's true.
I've
I would have liked to try a bunch of things, like peyote would be cool, or whatever that like South American
so
freaking
anyway,
drug is.
I've gotten high on pot. I've smoked pot once since 1992. So
Work?
was that?
Did it work? Did you get stoned? Because a lot of people,
I did not.
if they don't smoke it regularly, they don't really get
Yeah,
stoned.
I did not. When I was a teenager, smoked a lot. My brother always had it. He used to sell it. So I got high a lot when I was a teenager. You
Your
know?
brother, who's now a Trumper.
Yeah, yeah. And so I don't know. I right before I went to the service, about May of 1992, I went into the service, and before I went in, I got high with him. It was like one last time. And yeah, I've gotten high once since. No, I'm sorry, I smoked pot once since, and I did it nothing.
Yeah.
I was like, this sucks.
See, one thing I did like about pot was that I did not stutter, I didn't stammer, I didn't trip over my words. I was a lot more fluid up to a
Yeah.
certain point, and then I started babbling.
If you want to visit my state, we've got a good history of things not being the way they were years ago. So come on down. You might change your mind about all that stuff.
Yeah, I have to admit, I'm quite fond of pot. Although Sister Danger, I am acquainted with dozens of people who just don't like it, who've tried it and they're like, yeah, that's not for me. You know what I mean?
Pot or DMT?
Pot.
Oh yeah. Well,
some people I know don't like it because they prefer peppy drugs or whatever, you know, and that's not my thing. So maybe that's why I don't prefer those things, and I prefer the pot.
It'll make me puke if I smoke too much. So,
Right.
but the last time I tried it was, I don't know, several months ago. Here, my neighbor lady just over the way, she has medicinal pot, and I was drinking, so I'm standing out on my back porch or whatever, and I'm drinking. And I'm like, man, you know what? Like, she came, so come over. This was during COVID. So she was standing on the sidewalk. She's just like talking to me from far away. But she's like, is it okay if I smoke a joint? And I'm like, I don't care. So then because now I'm buzzed, I'm like, you know what? It's been a long time since I tried smoking a joint. Can I try smoking a joint? So she's like, sure. So she has this little stub, and she gives this little stub to me that's maybe like 3 puffs or whatever. I took 2 of them. I didn't even smoke this whole thing, right? Like I was so fucking high. I was high for like at least 8 hours. It was not okay. And all I could say was, why did you guys let me do this terrible, terrible idea? This is the worst.
You blamed other people for your own agency, Sister Danger? I'm shocked.
Yes, well, actually, and that's what they said. They were like, well, because we can't tell you not to do things because you will just do what you want to do. And I said, the next time I have this idea, just remind me of this experience and I will self-police myself. Right? Just be like, remember the last time you did this or that thing? But like then the next day, like I woke up and my brain was still like in fuzzy. I hated it. I was like, I can't think about anything. I cannot complete a sentence. I can't have a whole like.
So it just doesn't agree with you, basically.
It was terrible. Oh, it was the worst. Like, and that's what happens basically every time. And if I would have probably smoked just a couple more, I probably would have ended up puking. But the next day, I was like, you know what? I've got some mushrooms around here somewhere that have been waiting to be done. I should just eat them. And so I did. So the next night, I ate my mushrooms. And the next morning, it was like I had slept for a week, right? Like some place where people were waiting on me and bringing me. I was like, I'm so relaxed and rested. This is the best. Everything is reset to normal.
You sort of floss your doors of perception.
Hoo-wee. Like, yeah, but pot just bores the fuck out of me. Like, all you want to do is sit there, eat shit, veg out, and watch things. I don't know.
There were no doors of perception on marijuana, that's for sure.
Like, and I was like, why do people like doing this drug? I can't think about anything. And then my friends were, because I was like, hey guys, I'm super high, right? Like, and my friends who do it were laughing at me, and I was like, well, how do you guys even do this? And they were like, that's why we do it. And I was like, oh, that's terrible. I don't like that at all.
Well, I mean, because it's relaxing. I mean, I could do that if you want to. It's definitely for chilling out and being mellow.
Yeah, but that makes me stressed out. That does not actually mellow me out. It makes me stressed to feel like I can't really complete a whole thought, or I don't know.
See, pot doesn't. None of that stretches me out, but meditation does. I've had people tell me a
Oh,
lot of things I would do meditation, and every time I tried to meditate, it's made me hostile. The whole thought of just. I mean, the thing is, I'll reflect. I'll drive my car and I'll reflect and I'll think, have my thoughts, be with my thoughts. But to sit there in silence and to do fuck that, I really want to. That makes me hostile.
you're not the only one, actually.
Joe.
My troll is like that. No, he does not like silence. I like silence a lot. I am perfectly okay with just sitting in complete silence and thinking about things. He does not like it. He wants to have some kind of a sound, and it makes him aggravated in the way that you are talking about. But I think that meditation is kind of a whole different thing. And there are definitely different. I love meditation, but there's different ways to meditate. Some of them are super strict, like clear your mind of everything, or you have fucked it up and failed. And then some of them are more like practice like a rote activity and then let your mind go wherever. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm just blathering.
That's all right. I mean, I just want to say to Joe's point earlier about, you don't like meditation because it makes you feel aggravated. There, without wanting to, long distance diagnose, I mean, that could be the aggravation of the fact that you're not doing what you set out to do when you tried to meditate in the first place. I mean, if you're sitting there thinking, why can't I be peaceful? Then it's not working.
I mean, it just like for me, like I kind of like what Amy was saying. Like if I'm going to be with my thoughts, I like background music, or even like sure. A lot of times I'll do it in the car, and even just the noise of the road is enough for me. But if I don't have like that white noise, the idea of just sitting there or they'll say like focus on one thing or concentrate or chant. Oh God.
And that's the other thing I was going to say, Sister Danger. You said someone who doesn't like silence. I've had tinnitus since 2006.
That's your thing?
Yeah, I've got sound in my ears 24/7 that I can't turn off or do anything about. And so silence to me would be an absolute monumentally deep experience. I mean, I haven't experienced silence so long that I can only barely remember having experienced it. You know what I mean? And I live up on top of a mountain where there's virtually no sounds for most of the day.
I wonder if being in a sleep depth, or not sleep depth, sensory depth situation would affect that.
Nope, doesn't help. Nothing helps. I've done deep meditation and everything like that. And when I used to only have one tone going off in my ears, now I've got 4, right? But I used to have just one. And back then, I could almost talk myself into thinking I could meditate my way out of it. Like it's not that far from silence, But now I have 4 different tones going, and silence is just a fantasy of mine. So you're a special person who doesn't like silence should be grateful that they can experience it at all.
Well, the thing is that would, I mean, well, I'm not grateful about silence, but I would drive me nuts if I had a tone. See that, because you don't have any ability to control what the sound is. That's the problem. I would have a problem with that too. That would probably drive me insane.
Literally for 14 years, Joe, my tinnitus was unchanged. Well, I shouldn't say unchanged. It was the same sounds, but they got louder and more sort of like difficult to ignore. And then at the beginning of the pandemic, when I was locked down, I don't even know what happened. But my tinnitus shifted for the first time ever. And since then, it's been shifting all over the place. I mean, like right now, it's comparatively quiet to how it can be, but sometimes it can be so shrill you want to scream. And so as regards meditation, which is where we started with this, I mean, if you have the condition that I have and you don't develop some level of Zen, you're going to kill someone. You're going to go crazy because it never goes away, ever, not even for a second. So
that's pretty horrible.
It's a kind of torture, really, and you just have to develop a mentality of learning how to ignore it or think past it. You can't let it take up a full tray of your thoughts.
It's amazing that you're as chill as you are, considering.
Paul, when I said we were going to send you as the emissary to bring the truth back from the DMT world, you looked a bit apprehensive.
Michael, I haven't done a full hit of DMT for a few years now. Because sometimes when you have these experiences, you need time afterward to reckon with what you've experienced. And there's no better way to say it than that. I mean, it's so good that you almost can't handle it. And then you have to reckon with
All the thoughts.
all the shit that you have experienced. And it really challenges atheism, particularly with DMT.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely, Sister Danger. And to be honest, I mean, one time when I was in Lanzarote with my friend Jen, we did some micro dots. I saw the tunnel in the sky, and it was as real as the boat that was in the harbor to me. I mean, there was a tunnel in the sky. I was sitting there looking right at it, and I don't know what to tell you. Hallucinating is what I can tell you. That's what you're doing. You're hallucinating. There's not really a tunnel in the sky, but it connects with all this shit that you brought up to believe in and or not even believe in, but to acknowledge exists, I mean, so yeah, I mean, there can't be a tunnel in the sky, right?
Sometimes I don't know. I think it kind of,
because you've wandered in on a fun part of the conversation.
yeah. Like we're totally not talking about politics right now.
So Paul, you've had years.
Huh?
You've had years.
Right.
You haven't sorted through those thoughts.
Well, put it this way. It's honestly, it's overwhelming because you can take a little bit and have a nice time, but if you take every time I take a full hit now, I will break through, and breaking through, you're confronted with things that are very, very difficult because they don't seem to be emanating from you. Normally, when you're hallucinating, I've done all sorts of different psychedelics, right? And normally, when you're hallucinating, at least speaking for myself, I can tell I'm hallucinating. Right. I know when something isn't really there and my brain is projecting it. And like I said to you last time we talked about this, if I'm on ketamine, I can recognize that it's coming from my psychology. If I'm on LSD or mushrooms or 2CBs or something more psilocybin-based, you sort of feel like you're seeing into another dimension. Like, maybe the air has something more to it than what's there, and you might be able to see just through. When you break through, it's like this whole other universe comes crashing down on Earth, and it's full of these beautiful beings doing all kinds. And they're not all people, man. They're not all people. And this is the thing. I'll give you an example of why it's hard for me to just say, "Oh, this is all coming from me." The last time I broke through, which is, I suppose, must have been sometime in early 2019. One of the hallucinations I had was a gentleman who looked like he came from about 1914, all right? He was dressed in very fancy, dapper clothes, right? And the most striking thing about this is this gentleman had a monocle, all right? Who the fuck wears a monocle? I've never seen anyone wear a monocle except for Colonel fucking Klink on Hogan's Heroes.
The Monopoly guy.
Why would my brain picture some dude in a monocle?
Real person, though. I mean, lots of unreal, whatever people. So yeah, cartoons wear monocles.
Yeah, I mean, you don't understand. I mean, these people are right fucking there. It's not as if it's a hallucination or they're translucent or they're some sort of specter, which may be the case, for example, if you're in ketamine and you're having hallucinations, you might see like ghostly apparitions or whatever. These are fucking three-dimensional people looking right the fuck at you, who seem to have an independent existence and an independent, I mean, what they're, like, things can be happening in the periphery that you're not paying attention because you're looking over here, but there's stuff happening over here, and there's a whole narrative going on over there that you're not even paying attention to, but you can look at it and see whatever happening, but it's happening whether you're paying attention to it or not.
Man, I feel like I've got to experience
that your brain can project this entire spherical, completely tangible hallucination. It feels like you're there. It feels like there is here, interposed with reality, and it's really hard to reckon with. Because it seems as real as any of your perceptions are right here, right now.
I feel like I gotta experience this, man. Like this is just like a selling point for me right now.
Yeah, I've wanted to do DMT as well. I've never had a chance to. So.
All right, Kazoom, here it is.
What you
We
wish
just need
for.
to road trip out there this summer, right? We're just gonna road trip out to where Goth is, and we'll just all have like a breakfast club, you know. I don't know. We'll be up there doing Rocky Mountain High or something. Like oh man.
And Michael will be the anchor of sobriety.
I feel like I've had dreams.
He'll be our reality check.
Like the way that you are describing this experience, though, like dreaming is like my superhero power. I dream really prolifically and a lot, and sometimes the dreams are like they are not dreams, right? I don't know how to. There's no way to really describe that experience unless
everybody's had that though.
But it's like sometimes my dreams don't feel like they're dreams so much as maybe an astral travel or something to that effect, or maybe a different like somebody else's consciousness, right, that you're observing or watching through or something to that effect, right? But I remember like you were talking about, you know, the whole, but there's no tunnel in the sky. And I have a dream journal. So I write down most of my dreams that I think are
how much for not 2019? I want the whole thing. How much? Your dream journal. How much for your dream journal? How much?
For my dream journal? It's like 100 pages.
I want to buy your dream journal.
You want to buy my dream journal? I will share my dream journal with you if you want to read it. Some of it is kind of like sexy time like stuff too. I'm just telling you because I know, super shocking, but I'm just letting you know. Sometimes I write it down and I write it pretty raw with very little editing because it seems like that defeats the purpose if you're editing stuff. But anyway, like one of my most profound dreams though that I had years, I mean, I think I was maybe in my later 20s, maybe very early 30s, but I was living in Seattle and proper, and I had a dream. I would have my own apartment, so I didn't live with anybody. And one morning I had a dream that I met God. And it was this very, very profound dream. And what happened was I was like kind of at the foot of God.
Did she have 3 boobs?
No, there was no actually looking at the God. But what God did was God conferred upon me the ability to suddenly understand everyone else's perspective so if I looked at that person right there on the sidewalk and I wanted to understand why they were where they were at that moment in time, I could instantly get this knowledge. And all it did was made me like wake up feeling utterly humble and profoundly like sad about how mean we are when we judge other people, because everywhere I looked, every single person had this unimaginable story that you never would normally know. And like I had this amazing ability to just like look at people and realize that they had a whole course of life that had brought them to where they were. And it was just as hard as anyone else's life. They had just as many, you know, high points and sad points and things that beat them down.
I
and
only
things
wish that were
like,
true.
It was like this. It was a really profound dream that just made me like I came away from it just thinking to myself, don't judge people. Like you cannot judge people. Like I mean, obviously we have to some degree to be able to function and like operate in a world with other people, but like I don't know, like it never left me. But I mean, sure, I guess if you want to read my dream journal, it started when I was like 6.
I was just joking. I was just joking. I was seeing how willing you were to share.
Well, I've thought about publishing it before. So I'm yeah.
It's
I don't know.
raw, sexy time. So yeah, you'd make some money.
I mean, but that's not most of them. Most of them are just really weird. So, like, I don't know, the dream I posted about on Facebook like a couple nights ago where I owned a goat and my mom was trying to convince me to enroll my goat in a satanic goat cult. what? Like, what are you even dreaming, brain? What's happening right now?
That sounds reasonable to me.
What? Satanic goat cult. It's a thing.
See, well, then the question I have though is that in that cult, do they sacrifice goats and which or not? Because if they don't, then I wonder is it still okay to eat like goat curries and stuff or goat biryani, or would that be considered part of the sacrifice? Because that would be actually kind of cool. I might join because I like those dishes.
Oh no.
Did the goat have Satan shoes? Okay, sorry.
That's all I remember about the dream. I don't remember anything else. Like I had a goat and my mom really wanted me to enroll it in the state. And like there was something about negotiating my goat's enrollment, but that's like in murky dreamland where it's just like, and then I woke up. So
I've got a question for the whole group. Okay. So I'm sure all of us can remember a dream we had, say, years ago or in childhood or whatever. Even maybe you remember a particularly intense dream, might have been a good dream, might have been a bad dream, right? And you remember it as a dream. But since it's only a memory, how do you distinguish it from other memories? How do you know it was a dream and not real? Or how do you know? I mean, do you just tell yourself that was a dream and therefore it goes into like a different compartment in your brain somehow? Or is memory just memory?
It's like when you have like those really super realistic dreams.
Or just a dream that you remember for whatever reason. I would postulate that if you remember a dream from childhood, the dream must have some at least significant symbology for you, or you wouldn't have remembered it in the first place. You know, there's a reason you retain certain information, and that's not just about dreams. That's about everything. If you remember anything from childhood, virtually everything that you recall it for a reason. It stays there for a reason. It doesn't stay there at random.
There were dreams that from childhood that I had remembered at one time that I no longer remember. I don't think there's any left that I still remember.
Right.
I have some from older, when I was like in my 20s and 30s, but nothing that goes back, to when I was a kid, I don't think.
I can remember lots of dreams from when I was younger simply because I used to have a lot of Armageddon dreams. And so those are pretty potent on my brain. So I remember them just because of that.
I thought of one that I remember. I had a dream that I was in my apartment complex that we lived in, and I heard this really loud sound. And it was like, like this rushing sound. And I went outside and there was this huge alien, like space. It was definitely a spaceship from, it was huge and it was landing at the end of my building. And the aliens came out and they were shooting people. And I remember running and I fell down and I kept trying to get up and I kept falling down and slipping. When I woke up, apparently because we had baseboard heating, there was like some sort of weird problem. I guess they had the lines that shut down and they cleared them, so they were purging the air. So it was making this loud like sound. And I had apparently got up in bed and run because all my pillows and sheets and everything were off the foot of the bed. So I had literally gotten up and fallen down, and in my dream, I'm running because I was actually running on top of my bed.
I just want to bring attention to a comment by CRB Vegas. He asks, is there really a way to lucid dream? Internet has guides, but I'm not sure I buy it. I never remember my dreams.
Oh, yeah.
That question is yes. Back in the 80s, I did this whole thing on Omni Magazine about lucid dreaming. And in order to lucid dream, there's like certain steps that you have to take. And one of those steps, the easiest one to do is repeatedly throughout the day. You have to tell yourself that you're in a familiar surroundings, but not at home or work. So someplace familiar. I used to use Disneyland because I know Disneyland like the back of my hand, even though I've only been there like half a dozen times. But you tell yourself first thing when you wake up, before you have breakfast, before you really do anything, tonight when I dream, I'm going to dream I'm in Disneyland, and when I'm at the Matterhorn, I'm going to realize I'm dreaming. And you tell yourself that every 3 or 4 hours throughout the day. And it won't happen on the first night, and it won't happen on the second night. But if you keep doing it, it might take 2 or 3 weeks, but you keep doing it, and sooner or later you'll be in a dream, and you'll realize you're in Disneyland, and you realize you're dreaming. And the trick then is not to wake up, and that can take some practice because usually you wake yourself up.
Yes.
So it takes a bit of practice. You can't just decide to do it. I reiterate.
You know what? One of the things I have found that
It
helps
takes
with
training in
that.
the same way that playing a guitar takes training. You can't just pick up a guitar and play it. You got to learn how to play it. And lucid dreaming is the same.
Yeah, one of the things that I think helps with the waking yourself up, or at least that I guess maybe I have found over time, is if you practice, like if you are dreaming, but not lucid, just regular dreaming, and you wake up because whatever, right? Practicing going back to sleep and re-entering that same dream will help you with lucid dreaming.
Right.
Because it means that you've become aware, but you've gone back into whatever that state was where your brain was doing that thing. That's something that I have found. I never had much problem though with like when I say it's my superhero powers, because I feel like even though the things you're describing I think are legit and real, I never really did many of those things. Like I just learned this thing came to me quite easily, of like lucid dreaming and whatnot. I think one of my hardest experiences in dreams was it wasn't being lucid, it was learning to take control of. So I had a series of flight dreams or
Same.
falling dreams where I would fall off of a cliff, and in my dreams I would in that time become lucid, right? Like I would lucidly know that I was falling off this cliff, that I am in a dream and it is a dream and therefore I'm in control. But it is so hard to overcome this notion that that gravity exists and you're just going to fall and hit the ground, and to be like, well, I'm in my dream and I can make my brain do whatever I want. That's a really hard thing to do. And it took me like a series of just having this repetitive dream where I would fall and fall, and eventually, like, it started first with like I would fall, and the first thing I did was just not hit the ground. I would just stop myself before I hit the ground. But I couldn't make myself go up. I couldn't make myself go where I wanted to go, like in a flying fashion. And I had to go bit by bit, Yeah,
I
go ahead.
learned how to fly in a dream, and basically I can tell you the secret because I know I'm right, because I know I'm right because I was told this in a dream, so I know it's true. Basically, what you have to do is get on top of gravity. Bingo.
Yeah. See, the thing is, I've had
Perspective.
lucid dreams, but the ones that were most memorable, one where it was somebody I was involved with at the time, and usually in the dream there's like, well, some people say you dream in black and white. My dreams are always in color, but this dream I actually had the sensation of smell.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
And that was cool. And that happened a couple of times, but then my favorite one of all time though was there was a problem I was working on at work that I was stymied on. Mm-hmm. That night during my dreaming, I saw myself and I knew it was a dream, and my dream self knew it was a dream, and my dream self spoke to me. And there was a blackboard and I wrote the problem out, and I came up with the solution and told myself how to solve the problem. And I woke up and I wrote it down and the shit worked.
Yeah, I think that's totally, I've totally done problem solving. Like, in fact, dream problem solving is sort of a thing that I like to do. I think that it's very cool that people do that, because it's basically kind of like, at least in my experience of that sort of thing, really what's happening is your brain is letting go of whatever you've been clinging to that has been preventing you from seeing the solution. Like, you have a thing and your brain is like, this is how the thing must work. And what you need to do is let go of that so the solution can occur to you. And then that's what happens, like when your dream self is telling you the thing. That's super cool. Like, I'm like, yeah, I'm not the only person that's ever happened to.
I've had other times where I kind of, like you said, you had that kind of dry moment, but it was, the funny part for me was the fact that I literally was talking to my dream self was talking to me, and I was talking back, and it was just like, do this. And then I asked myself questions, and it was like, no, like this, that, no, like, whoa, okay. So I asked my boss the next day, I'm like, well, now that I'm doing work in my sleep, do I get comp time for that?
I mean, that's like you thinking outside the box. It's so cool that you had an experience like that. I think like my earliest dream that I can ever recall having, I don't know how old I was. Maybe I must have been about 4 years old. I don't know. I had a yellow Holly Hobbit blanket on my bed, and I used to have a recurring dream of an alligator circling my bed. And then as I got older, and I actually still to this day, I will dream about my brother, but definitely in high school, I would just have, because I used to have screaming nightmares in high school. Like I would just scream in my sleep and wake up everybody and wake up myself sometimes. But I would dream about my brother. Just my brother and I were very antagonistic to one another growing up, and we probably still are a little bit, even though we get along and I consider us on good terms. We're still very just antagonistic because but he used to do things as a kid, like he would stand at the door, the border of my door, and he would just stand there like, I'm not in your no, in real life. And so like he would do this kind of thing, like he would just stand there and he'd be like, well, I'm not in your room, so you can't tell me to get out of your room because I'm not in your room. But then he'd be standing right at the, like, it's so Bart Simpson, right? And so I would have nightmares where my brother was just antagonizing the shit out of me, and I would just be screaming like, Mom, Ryan won't get out of my room, or whatever, or won't do this or won't do that, like that. And then in high school, for a long, long time after that, also, I would have dreams that I was being chased by Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And those are like probably the most recurring dreams I've ever had. I haven't had a Leatherface dream in a long time, though.
I mean, I have seen my dreams always in color, also like you guys, and I've heard that you're not supposed to dream color; it's black and white. But my dreams are always in color. I've had sense of smell. They're all pretty vivid. But I went when I was like a lot younger, my early and mid teens. I had a recurrent dream that I remember still now very, very, very vividly, that I was running away from nothing, and like the nothing, well, I guess in
Like the
the never ending.
never-ending story, nothing.
Right. Yeah,
Okay.
kind of like that, I guess. And like if I turned and looked, everything would just disappear. And like wasn't even like a blackness. It was just nothing. Like I can't even describe it.
That
And
actually sounds terrifying.
it was terrifying, and it was just like the recurring dream when I was younger. In my late teens, though, I smoked lots and lots of pot, lots and lots and lots of pot, and I stopped remembering my dreams. And everybody's like, it's the pot will do it. I have no idea if that was accurate or not, so whatever.
See,
So I didn't really have any dreams that I could remember again until like my mid and late 20s. Um, and it's increasing since then. But the one thing about my dreams that I noticed, I can hear, like if I'm talking to somebody in my dream, they are crystal clear. My voice is always muffled.
wah, 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 wah.
Yeah.
Well,
Hands up, everybody who's been in their dream in a body that isn't their own body. Yeah. Yeah. Like you're someone else, but you're still you. You know you're you, and everyone else seems to know you're you, but you don't look like you at all.
But that would be pretty obvious for me.
Man, I kept thinking about the flying dream thing. The way that I end up flying in any dream is the same as what Douglas Adams wrote in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where, okay, the way that you fly is to fall but miss the ground.
I think that the dreams where I perceive myself or I'm just in someone else's body, those are the dreams that's one of the types of dreams that I sometimes don't, I'm unsure that that's really a dream, if you know what I mean. Like I've had dreams like that, and when I have them, it always seems as if like the people in my dream that talk to me as if they know me, I realize that they think they recognize this shell that they're talking to, but I don't know who they are. Sometimes it's not even in, even in English. I'll be just like in a completely foreign country, in a foreign body, like in a foreign environment, everything. And like normally for me when that happens, it's like I'm in someone else's body going through their daily life, whatever that is. And then I realized, because like there's people talking to me, I don't know who they are, but they seem to know me, and it's really quite strange. And even though this happens when I'm asleep and dreaming, those don't feel to me like my dreams. Those feel like there is a different thing that is happening, that
Visions. They're visions.
their
Like
vision.
there's a collective dream world or something.
Past life memories.
You should
Well,
write them all down in a journal.
actually, I
You should
normally
write
think of
them
them
all
as,
down in a
I
journal.
do.
Then someday they'll be holy text.
I actually do, I do write them down because I find them very fascinating, especially the differences. But I think of them more like clairvoyance or sometimes astral travel. I do a lot of, I have a lot of experience.
So one of the things that I always thought was kind of funny is people always say stuff like, "Oh, well, if you die in your dream, you'll really die." But I got mugged in a dream, and a guy shot me in the brain, and I died. And I was aware of the fact that my body had died, and it was like, what the fuck are you supposed to do now? You know?
Sister Danger, you froze. So that's why.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you froze up. So yeah, you vanished for a minute there.
Yeah,
Um,
whatever.
You know, so it's been said. I've read that one of the things that can get someone into the being able to lucid dream is to do exactly what Sister Danger has been doing, and that is to write down journals. Keep a journal of your dreams, and you can get used to thinking about your dreams.
right.
So when you are dreaming, it's not as jolting, and it's not the time to, as soon as you find out you're dreaming, oh, it's time to wake up. No, you can think about your dreams. It's okay to think about your dreams. So yeah.
See, the thing is though, is I would rather spend the time to make reality better. I don't want to make my dreams better. I want to make my reality better.
You spend a third of your life asleep, though.
I actually don't. So even though lucid dreaming's a thing, I don't actually try to lucid dream very often, because remember how you were saying, Joe, that you had this dream where you were telling yourself how to solve this problem.
Mhm.
I often perceive my dreams as me, like my own brain, trying to tell me something. Like I'm trying to talk to myself. That's what's happening in a dream. And so if I seize control of that, I'm not listening anymore. I'm trying to tell my brain what I want it to do, and I'm not listening. And so I don't like to lucid dream. Yeah, it's a thing and people talk about it a lot, but I guess that I feel like when I'm dreaming, it's me showing myself things, and I should just listen and sometimes go along with it, go wherever it takes me, and then think about it. It doesn't have to mean anything. It doesn't have to be symbolic of anything. It doesn't have to be any deep Jungian, meaning to your dream. It just think about what it is you dreamed, and think about it in relation to what's been going on with you, recently, if that's even a thing. And I don't know, but satanic goats.
Yeah, satanic goats. I think the most interesting thing about dreams is that it kind of shows how your mind works, how your brain works, and like
Right.
how the concept of time in your dream is absolute total bullshit. Like in an instant, and like that, your brain can conjure up a story that if you're actually going through it or watching it or experiencing it in real life would take hours and hours and maybe even days.
Yes.
But
Yes.
that entire story is created in a moment.
Well,
And I mean, there's like the story of the guy had this dream that he was in France during the revolution, and that he could hear the crowd and he could smell everything that was going on around him, and he could look off into the distance, and he's being marched towards the guillotine. And he experienced that entire scene in his dream. And he got his head cut off in the guillotine, and he woke up. And when he woke up, he realized that a picture frame had fallen off the wall that was next to his bed and landed on his neck.
Oh,
And it was in that instance, the pain on his neck, his
was real.
brain created this entire scenario to go along with it.
That's wild. I mean, and it's true, because I've had times where my alarm clock went off and I hit snooze and I fell back to sleep and had a fairly elaborate dream between the 5 to 10 minutes of the snooze, and it's like way more apparent time passed in the dream than actually elapsed in the real world.
Well, and we know though, like what you were saying, Rob, like we know for a fact that the brain fills in all kinds of stuff where we don't actually have that knowledge. I mean, we know that from straight up perception through your eyeballs. What
Yeah,
you
that's how certain optical illusions work.
Right, because what you actually see in your field of vision versus what your brain fills in based on little points of information is, so it makes sense that like a thing happens and then the brain makes up an entire whole story to explain that thing, right? So that's cool. I don't know. I
think it's
Have you ever had-
interesting about that. Your senses are so open to being fooled.
They are.
Have you ever had 4D dreams? Dreams where things go beyond the reality that we normally think of, like something like you see something that's the equivalent of a hypercube, or have you ever seen more colors in dreams than you can in real life? Can you see more of the spectrum than you can in real life? It's happened to me a few times.
Both things. I think I've had one dream that I documented that was a 4D dream in the way you're describing it, because I think I literally titled that dream as the fourth dimension when I recorded it later. But I think what happens to me more often than that, though, is meta dreaming, where in the dream, I have a dream self that is dreaming, and I know that. Oh, where'd everybody go?
I don't know. We're gonna miss my share.
I'm not sure if he bailed or if he had a technical. Don't know.
I had been having lucid dreams for 2 years since 2019, and they were actually nightmares, recurring. And since I got my shot, my vaccination, I haven't had one. And I was having about 2 a month, and I haven't had my second shot yet. But it's been 3 weeks and I haven't had one. But I was going through a lot of grief in 2019. A lot of my clients died. One of my friends, I'm never seeing him again. My supervisor from my job, where I had a good setup, she quit. And so I had to scramble to find new supervision for school purposes, and I was losing a lot of things. I changed my job. Then I had more clients die. Then the pandemic happened, and people were dying left and right. And all that death was giving me nightmares about zombies. And the nightmares are different themselves, but the fact that there's zombies in that world has been constant. And whenever I get to a point where the zombies are about to get me, I fly straight up. Like something in my head realizes, hey, this is a dream. And my reaction is fly straight up, look down at the situation, and reassess. But then I realize I'm dreaming. So it's part of my just self-preservation instinct that knocks me out of not realizing that I'm in a dream and takes me into, hey, you're dreaming.
So you fly straight up. So what you're saying is you ascend into heaven.
No.
You
I fly straight up like 100 feet, like Iron Man. Like straight up. But since I got this vaccine, I have not had a nightmare like that.
Anxiety dreams, big time. I have shit like that all the time.
I haven't had a client die.
Dreams and variations. But that's interesting though, because that shows you. I mean, that tells you a little bit about what really truly is concerning to you, right? I mean, you might not even realize it. That's why I think it's just important to just listen to ourselves when we talk to ourselves in our dreams, right? I mean,
can't.
I totally interpret all the zombies as people with COVID.
Like, actually, are you being sarcastic? I have trouble telling when you're being sarcastic because you have almost perfected poker face.
Like, I'm being sarcastic today.
But what did you say? You haven't been sarcastic today? Is that what you? What?
The whole day.
Bullshit. I don't don't even think that's possible.
I-
You going a day without being sarcastic at some point. I don't believe it.
I did rename myself after Paul's ears, though.
Paul's ears.
Funny.
Paul's,
I'll jump in here because
that was
some of you guys have
sad.
talked about some of the dreams, and I got one that's really, really short. And the reason I can still remember this probably is because I wrote it down years ago. And by years ago, I mean about 30 years ago. And I'm almost 59 now. So I wrote it down as an adult, but it was a dream I had when I was like 3. And it's full of symbology, which is kind of obvious, but I still don't know what this dream means. So I would like to describe it briefly. It doesn't take very long. And then ask your opinions. So I was a little boy. I was like 3. And in the middle of the night, I woke up and I was going to go to the bathroom. And in between the bathroom door and my mom's bedroom door, normally those 2 doors are together, but there was a door in the middle of them, like a whole door in between. That wasn't the bathroom. And it wasn't, so I opened it up because there shouldn't be a room there. And even though it was the middle of the night, there was like this white room and there's like daylight pouring through a single window. And there's a stack of cushions in the middle of the floor that I was only like 3 or 4, so they're way higher than my head, but they might have been 5 or 6 feet high, right? And on the top, and each cushion was a different color, and it had tassels dangling down from the corner, and the room was bright, bright white. And at the top of the cushions, there was a crown that had like 4 or 5 sort of spiky bits going up, and it had a whole bunch of blue and red and green gems around it. And when I'm looking at this crown, and I'm a little boy, obviously, and I'm looking at this crown, and I knew it was mine. I was meant to have it. It was for me. But in order to get it, I had to climb up the cushions and get it without knocking the cushions over. So I start climbing up the cushions, and I get a little bit past halfway, and I'm thinking I'm close enough to reach it now, even though I didn't get to the top yet. And so I reached for it, but because I did that, I pulled the cushions over, and they were all over the floor, and the crown was nowhere. I couldn't see it. It had vanished. And there was like 3 or so still standing in the middle of the floor. And on the cushion, in the middle of the cushion, there was a pearl. And as a little boy, I must have heard that story, The Princess and the Pea, right? Because that symbology is too similar. Basically, the ending of the dream for me as a kid was I failed. I was supposed to get the crown, but I didn't. And I failed. But the pearl was like confirmation that I couldn't get it because I really was supposed to have it, but I guess I just reached too soon for it or something. You know what I mean? I don't know. What do you guys think?
We had this collective question. If you can think back to the light that was coming through the window, was there any dressing around the window?
No, it was just a big window with split into 4. But it was a big window going like that.
We just wanted to rule something out.
We did?
Yeah.
Well, what was that thing? Because I don't remember us having a discussion.
Curtains of a certain hue.
What in the fuck are you talking about?
In the white room with black curtains.
Oh, right.
What?
It's a song. It's a song.
It's a song by Cream, I think.
By Cream.
Oh, okay. I don't know that music, so I don't. Cream.
Okay.
That's why. I'm sorry.
What do you think the dream's supposed to be trying to tell me? Because I've been thinking about this for 55 years, and I still don't really have a clue.
If we're going Freudian here, did you have the disappointment of your parents?
By the age of 3, I really didn't perceive that as far as I can recall, but probably, yeah.
I guess it's, I don't know. Sorry.
Disappointment from the parents, Michael, that was a lot later on.
Finish with the Freudian thing. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, you were going to, wasn't there more? That was it? That was the end of the Freudian thing? Was there disappointment with your parents? Oh my God. Really? If that's what you're going to boil Freud down to, then you may as well ask.
I didn't hear anything phallic in the entire dream. Did you?
Well, he was.
There was a crown. There was a pearl. Nothing that, strong like bull, resemble the
Haven't
phallus.
you ever heard of pearling? I mean, that's a thing, right? Like that could have been phallic. You never know. I mean, if you're gonna go Freudian, anyway. I don't know. Like when to hear you
Pearl. That's not really like you don't brag about pearling when you only used one pearl. Come on.
do you really think that a 3-year-old boy knows about pearling?
In 1965, no, I don't think so.
No, I think that I don't know, like to hear you tell it and just kind of like try to listen. The thoughts that go through my head are that so there's this crown at a top of a very colorful yet perfect stack of pillows, and I guess that to me that kind of means that somewhere along the way you have associated achieving what you see as the pinnacle with perfection, because what you couldn't mess up was these pillows. You couldn't topple them. You couldn't muss them up.
The only way to deserve the crown was not to knock the pillows over.
Right.
Get it.
Which you did. And then it's like, and then there was this pearl. And I almost feel like this pearl was like this secondary consolation prize of, and remember that you didn't make it, bruh. That's like, I feel like that's almost like what this little pearl of wisdom is telling you. Or maybe this pearl of wisdom is telling you that that value, maybe the whole point of this thing was so that you realize that you can achieve that pinnacle regardless of the state of those pillows. And that's what this pearl of wisdom is.
Or
right?
alternatively, it could be that you were a little kid and your brain just did weird shit.
I mean, yeah, like it could be that, but I don't actually find it to be that strange because
man.
I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is like Sword in the Stone, right? Like little kids, and you know about kings and King Arthur and cool fairy tales like that, right? And you perceive them as being at the top, and you perceive characters like King Arthur as being this paragon of whatever's even at that age, right? That's what kids cartoons are about. It sounded like a kids cartoon to me, I guess.
It's interesting because obviously your dreams to a certain degree are filled up from the images that you are surrounding yourself either in real life or in your imagination, right?
Yeah.
And so obviously I had either seen something on TV about the story of the Princess and the Pea, or maybe my mom read it to me for a bedtime story because my mom used to read me bedtime stories back in those days. So, because I find that the pearl and the pea, because she couldn't sleep in the bed because there was a pea in it, for Christ's sake, in the mattresses, which proves she was a real princess. That's the story, right?
Yes.
So I found it because in the dream I had this, like I told you, the crown was mine, man. It was mine. I was supposed to get it, and that was the thing.
But you fooled yourself, is what I'm saying. In the dream, you are overcoming yourself when you climb those pillows. That's what that is. Because does that make sense? I mean,
yeah. Do you think, because from what you said a moment ago, Sister Danger, about your more fulsome analysis of the whole thing? I mean, I was thinking, saying that, I'm thinking, well, my God, I moved here to Colorado and I've been stacking rocks ever since. I did this massive one the other day that was like 8 feet tall.
And how did you get 8 feet tall?
Dude, I'd be strong.
Okay.
No, we have a little ATV Bobcat, and I stand in the back of that for the final 4 rocks, because the final 4 rocks are like starting at my eyes and going up. So I can get to about here, and it's fine, but they're heavy rocks, right? You got to make the rocks at the top pretty heavy, otherwise they'll blow off. So
I find that whole thing fascinating, actually. I've seen some of your pictures of that, and at first I didn't actually believe that you were the one doing it. I thought that like maybe you had just come upon these pictures of rocks and were taking pictures of them. Right. And I'm like, wow, like you're actually the one stacking these fucking rocks. Like that's amazing. I could not do that. I don't think I could do that. But
It's
that's
fun.
probably means
I
you
find
can't.
it quite rewarding. I can't really even describe why, but I'll tell you this for nothing. I mean, the good part is, as far as sculptures that you can put around your garden go, if they're as organic looking as anything you can imagine, right? They go with
Yeah.
everything around them. So it doesn't, they don't, but I'm, oh my God, they're everywhere, Amy. I mean, I've got them all over the whole property.
But you don't know why you have this compulsion to stack the rocks.
It's a meditation. That's part of it. You know, seeking balance.
It's actually he's putting together
Yeah.
models of the location where the aliens will come.
That's what my girl says. She says I'm inviting the aliens down.
Oh my God,
Like-
I totally had a dream about that alien guy the other night. Like, you know, sometimes you just don't even remember. I super had a dream about the alien guy. Like, aliens, that guy. I didn't even remember that till you said thinking about the aliens. And then I was like, I had a total dream with that guy where I would, like, he and I were off alien hunting together. What?
Okay, so Paul is.
I love that dude.
So Paul is building models of the location of where the aliens will land, much like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, when the guy kept doing the models of the plateau. You've seen that movie, right?
Oh
Close
no!
Encounters.
Oh no!
I don't know if I have, to be honest.
I just
but-
grew
Oh
another.
my God.
I don't know if I've seen that
I
movie.
mean, no movie's like a cultural requisite, right? But I mean, Close Encounters of the Third Kind not only was a great movie in its own right when it was in the cinema, but it's been replayed a bajillion times. I mean, it's on every Christmas or so. You know what I mean? I mean, it's just one of those movies that keeps coming back like a bad head cold. You know?
I don't think you guys understand how little media I generally consume. I mean,
Yeah, but you're over 30, right? I mean, you've had plenty of chances to see the movie before you've had the lifestyle you enjoy at the moment.
okay, but I stopped watching TV when I moved out of my house at 18.
Okay, but like Close Encounters was made in like 1980 or something like that. I
78.
mean, it is like a it's like a piece of our entire culture. It's like so woven into U.S. American culture that like not knowing it is like weird. I mean, it's just really
It's like
really
saying you've
weird.
never heard of Star Trek.
Yeah,
How are we sure you're
I've
not?
heard of it. I've heard of it. I'm just not sure. I'm gonna also confess though that
I mean,
there.
there's like thousands of spoofs of it. I mean, it's just it's like a cultural a touchstone. I mean, it's
I
how
watch
do
a
you
lot
not
of
know it?
things though, and then I release them. I don't like
Fair
that is
enough.
that is literally
Okay.
a thing for me. And I mean, there's definitely things that I can tell you. Oh yeah, I've absolutely watched that movie. I literally remember almost nothing about it. The vaguest plot points I'll remember. I don't care who acted in it. I won't know if you reference them, and they'll be like, "Well, didn't you watch this movie?" And I'll be like, "Yeah, I saw it, but I saw it like 20 years ago." And
I'm such
it
a
was
pathetic movie nerd, Sister Danger. Right? There's some movies that I can literally recite not just the words, but the intonation of the actors saying the words.
that.
Right?
Well, yeah, I'm
And
with you
like,
on that actually for the movies that I know.
yeah, the movie I've seen the most times out of all movies, and I must have seen it more than 150 times, is the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Because you used to go every weekend, twice a weekend for like 2 years.
Yep.
Well, I must have seen it at least 150 times minimum. You know,
That so I like things that are, what do you call it? Is that like cult culture? Like, is that what you would call Rocky Horror? Like,
I think
kinda
at the time I was seeing it, it was still
subculture.
Avant-garde counterculture, but it
Yeah,
didn't.
counterculture. That's what I'm looking
Yeah.
for. I like a lot of counterculture stuff. I guess that for me, the way that I often remember things is the reason. This is what I think. This is what I attribute to why I don't remember sometimes. I mean, because there's literally movies that I've probably watched 2 years ago, and then the guys will talk about it, and I'll be like, "Have I seen that movie?" And they're like, "Yeah, we watched this like 2 years ago. You've seen this
Right.
movie," and I'm like, "Really? I don't even remember." Right? Because for me, when I watch things or read things, my brain looks for ideas that are embedded in those things, and that's what fascinates me about them. And so once I have latched on to the idea of the thing, I let go of all the rest. This is why I don't remember the names of authors a lot of times. It's
There's
like,
plenty of people that do that because it's unnecessary information for you, isn't it? It's not something
yes,
you need to refer to operate your in your day.
yeah, like I'm not
Other way around,
interested
I
in
can't
that.
help it. I reference my music and my movies far too often.
Like, so
I'm
I
that
mean,
guy.
there's some things that I memorize better than others. Like anything that involves music, I absolutely memorize better than others. So if it's a movie that I've seen like a lot of times, I don't know, there's some movies that I can just quote like ridiculous amounts of, but almost always for those movies, I also can hear that soundtrack in my head if I try. I can hear the music that's happening, and therefore I can recite that movie. And that holds true for a lot of other things. If I can hear that music, I can recite whatever went with it. But I guess that like I only the for me the only reason to know things like this is the artist that did this kind of art and these paintings, this is the person who wrote this opera, or whatever, is literally to be in conversations with other people and just sound like you know what you're talking about in the most superficial ways ever. Because if you want to talk about what the real importance and meaning of all of these things are, it doesn't matter who did it. It only matters like what ideas, what topics did it touch upon, what things did it make you think about or feel, and why did you feel those things? Those are the important things. The rest of it is irrelevant, right?
Okay,
The rest of
that's
it is
perfectly valid from a subjective point
like
of view. But you just push that on other people. I mean, everyone's allowed to take what they want from stuff, surely.
No, I mean, but like for me, that's what that is. It's like I'm at a party, I need to talk about things and sound like, I'm up on stuff. So I memorize some shit right ahead of time and like, oh, I recently went to the ballet and it was like George Balanchine and blah, 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 blah. And then, you sound like you can shake hands, kiss babies, do whatever, and people think you're normal or something while the whole time you're like, this is so fucking boring, but that's me.
Do you find that you suck at the game Jeopardy?
I never watched it very much, to be perfectly honest. I watched it when I was a little kid.
Watching a couple episodes and
would,
get back to us on how much you don't know of the trivial stuff.
I would imagine that I probably super suck at the game Jeopardy because I know for a fact that I suck at the game Trivial Pursuit. So I think that they're probably
I know people who
thing.
literally memorized all the answers on the cards so they can win at Trivial Pursuit every time.
Fuck those assholes.
It's not impossible. You first remember the oranges and then you remember the greens and you just do it that way. It's not impossible. Because especially if you say you suck at sports, for example, so you'll just memorize all the sports questions. You don't have to memorize every single question on the card.
The funny thing about this, right, is that you only have to know like a few things, right? So somebody wants to talk about sports for a second and they want to bring up basketball. You just be like, but wasn't Larry Bird the best basketball player ever? And then people are like, shit, you know something about sports, right? Not really, man. I just, whatever.
Not if they think Larry Bird was the best basketball player ever.
I mean, until
I don't
James
know.
came along.
I don't know anything about basketball, but I know that that's not true.
I'm actually pretty sure that it might be true. Look at his face, like, what? You actually believe that? I don't know. I mean, let's talk about quarterbacks for a second. Well, all I need to know are talking points. That's
if
it.
we're talking about quarterbacks and solipsism, we might be living in Tom Brady's dream.
That's a frightening thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever. Tom Brady sucks. I don't even know why people like that guy.
Nobody.
Well, I think a lot of people actively dislike him.
Oh man, I'm dying. I don't know very much about sports at all. So it's all crap coming out of my mouth. I mean, I like literally when you said the thing about the Raiders shirt, I was like totally not my shirt, and I picked my football teams and basically all of the other teams based on whether or not they have team colors that I like or a logo that I like. That's it. Like I don't care about the rest. I was like, I'll root for the underdog because, yeah, I love green and blue. And by that, I mean the Sounders, not the Seahawks.
Do you find that if you don't know either team, you tend to root for whichever one is the underdog?
No.
You don't have a personal
I root
investment.
for whichever one has looks that I like the best. Basically.
All right, so whoever has the coolest uniforms wins.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Right.
That's what I mean. When I was in high school, I remember one year for Christmas, I super wanted, because the 49ers were like the football team to get all of and so I super wanted like a 49ers sweatshirt and cool sweat shorts. And I had a little 49ers like football dude that was on a keychain or whatever. I don't even watch football, but that was the thing. And I loved their yellow and gold kind of Gryffindor colors, I guess, even though I'm not really a Gryffindor, but yellow and gold are great fucking colors. They're also the colors of House Lannister, which is awesome. So, maybe it's just because I like Tyrion, but whatever. And Tywin, but you know.
I'm a pledge of House Moderna.
What's the other house?
I'm a pledge of Pfizer. Hey, hands up everybody who's had at least one shot.
I got both.
You got both.
Wait, what? Oh, the shot. Oh, sorry. I got really distracted for a second. I haven't gotten the one shot yet. My mother has gotten her second shot just yesterday. So
Yeah.
I'll hopefully be getting my first here in like a week or so. I'm hoping.
I got my second today.
I get my second on the 9th.
I get my second on the 19th. And yeah, so, and it looks as well like it looks that they're easing up the restrictions in the UK, which means I'm going to go in June to Britain and my kids and get the rest of the shit out of my flat, because I had to leave everything there because we were in hard lockdown when I moved away, and there was no storage facilities open. There were no moving trucks you could rent. I mean, you know, it was in hard lockdown. So
what are the travel restrictions with regards to it? Do you have to be vaccinated in order to travel?
No, you won't have to be vaccinated to travel, but you will have to show a negative COVID test that was taken 72 hours or less prior to your departure. So I have to show that test before I get on the plane in America, and
or be vaccinated.
They'll probably want the same information on the other side as well.
It's not or be vaccinated.
No, it's not or be vaccinated. You're going to have to give them a negative test anyway, whether you've been vaccinated or not. If I've been vaccinated though and show a negative test might mean that when I get to the UK, I won't have to lock down for 10 days, because we were under the assumption going into this that we're going to have to lock down for 10 days or possibly even 2 weeks, which is a huge waste of time when you're on holiday. You know, I mean,
how do they make you do that? How do they verify that you locked down?
Sister Danger, if you're from different countries, it depends. America, because the travel corridor between America and the UK is so important, they haven't restricted Americans like they've restricted some of other parts of the world. And depending on where you're coming from in the UK during the coronavirus, they were making people stay at airport hotels literally for like 10 days at the cost of £1,000.
Wait, the people had to pay for it? They didn't?
Yeah, exactly. They had to pay it themselves. They were forced to do it at airport hotels. Now, that's a bargain for an airport hotel. You're paying way under the odds if you're only paying £1,000 for 10 days.
Oh, yeah.
Having said that, you're basically a prisoner.
Yeah, that's crazy. I didn't know that.
But I don't know how long that pertained, but Britain had a couple of hard lockdowns, you know, a few months ago. And it's my opinion, when I came over to this country in July, I mean, as far as I could perceive in Boulder, there was almost nothing moving in July. And yet y'all did not lock down over here like they locked down over there in Europe. I mean, when they locked down in Europe, they did not fuck around. You could go to stores that sold food or medicine or gas stations. That was pretty much all the businesses that were open. Nothing else was moving, you know? And like, you know, so here they've tried to keep everything going to at least a small degree, you know, like even dentists and stuff like that. You can go get an appointment, whatever, for example, even though someone's right in your face and they're going to have 10 patients today, right? So, you know, there's different ideas about what a hard lockdown is, but definitely when I was over there, it was really hard. So now we're going to go back. I'm going to go get my stuff out of my roommate's house and disperse it somehow, and then bring some home as well. And yeah, and then visit. I'm going to do a lot of visiting, obviously, but I got to take care of my business first. You know.
What state was it that the governor had banned the idea of having vaccine passports?
How do you ban an idea?
I would bet it was
They
Florida.
want, I guess it's not bad. Well, they want to ban the idea.
It's the state of stupidity. That's the state.
Yeah.
Oh, you got to narrow it down, my friend. Mississippi, Florida, Wyoming.
I'm uncomfortable with the idea of vaccine passports. I understand, I see very clearly the utility of such a thing, but I'm not an anti-vaxxer, not at all. But the idea that you might have to prove that you have to submit to a medical procedure because the government told you so, it's just uncomfortable to me. I mean, I actually see I got vaccinated, and I think people should get vaccinated. Don't get me wrong.
I mean, it's not new. I mean, we've done that here for a long time. I mean, you can't go to school in most states anyway in this country.
Right.
You know, or your kids can't go to school until they're vaccinated. So,
right.
I mean, it's not.
And I think that's fair enough. And a lot of people who don't vaccinate their kids don't send their kids to school for that reason. You know. But anyway, so
I'm actually kind of with you on that crazy idea of of like having to prove. I mean, yes, it's true, but travel is considered to. I mean, school is a thing that everybody must go and do, right? Travel is a thing that's either because of your work or it's optional.
As far as a passport, a stamp in your passport or ticket or whatever to say that you've been vaccinated and to travel internationally, Sister Danger, I don't think that's a problem. I don't think that's what people mean when they say travel, a vaccination passports. I think the vaccination passport is so that you can go into bars and nightclubs and concert halls and sports arenas and stuff like that.
I just can't get over a slippery slope feeling with that. I'm sorry.
To me, it's uncomfortable. Like I say, I understand the utility of it, but and I know the slippery slope can often be a fallacy, but it also often tends to work. Slippery slope is a thing, you know.
But I don't see the slope. I don't see the slope. Like people say it's slippery slope, but I don't see the slope. If businesses are going to be able to operate like normal, when people going into businesses feel uncomfortable, when people are maskless and handing their food and merchandise and they're exchanging money face to face, yeah, it's nice to know, you know, that you are protected as a citizen going in.
Do you not worry about the possibility of creating a whole class of citizens that's separate from the vaccinated that can't?
But we already have that, though. But we already have that.
Elaborate on that.
You can't send your kids to a public school unless
Sure,
they've been vaccinated. We already have that. It's nothing new. If you want to take part in our society, there are certain things that you have to do because you have a societal responsibility. If you don't want to take part in it, or if you don't want to do, you know, your part, then don't take part in society. Like you can't have everything. You can't have it both ways.
Vegas
was
saying that maybe we should go around if we're vaccinated with like the shape of a V on our clothes, and then when we get our booster, we can get another V.
But here's the thing that people like, oh, well, it's a vaccine, right? Expecting people to take a vaccine that's been around 50 years is nowhere close to expecting people to take one. But here's the thing: is it does have FDA approval. That's number one. They all do. The FDA had approved them. That's number one. Number two, there is no virus either dead or weakened in any of these vaccines that are being given, and there's no drugs in these vaccines. It's messenger RNA. So I mean, this we're not even like talking about, you know, oh, there might be an ingredient. It's messenger RNA. I mean, it's just like I don't like people are just and I mean, it's not like, we just came up with this vaccine. Oh, it only took a few months. It's like, actually, no, they've been working on these vaccines for years, with the SARS outbreak. So whatever. It's like, give me a break. It's
I agree with
foolishness.
everything you just said, right? I'm simply, and like I say, I'm pro-vax. I'm got vaccinated. I'm pro-vaccination. I think everybody should get vaccinated. I want to make sure that's clear. But I'm just uncomfortable because, like I say, I see anything that's a medical procedure. The government shouldn't be able to force you to have it or to not have it, right? If it's your choice according to your health.
But they're not.
Yeah, with the
Yeah.
passport, they're
Well,
not. With the passport, it's just an issue of,
mm-mm.
well, if you want to do these things, you have to show this. But this isn't the government
Right.
saying, well, you have to do this. They're saying, well,
Right.
no, if you want to
No,
do these things, you have to do
no, they're
this.
not overtly saying it. They're corralling you into doing it through basically backdoor coercion. That's what that would be tantamount to.
That's true.
It's not really backdoor coercion if they're saying it right up front. I mean,
I guess it
I mean,
depends on where they give you the shot, but
Yeah.
bum. So I don't know. I think people like freaking out about the vaccines in general is foolishness, and I think people freaking out about the passports is nearly as foolish.
Well, I mean, there is a certain amount of experimental elements to the vaccines. I mean, yes, they've been working on them for a while, but they approved them at a rate that they normally don't. So these are slightly experimental. So I mean, I'm pro-vaccine, absolutely. And as I said, I plan on getting one, getting but I can understand people's nervousness around it because it is kind of experimental.
I think it's the first messenger RNA vaccine I think that we've had. I think.
I don't think
Yeah,
my
so that would
nervousness
definitely
around
make
it
it experimental.
Yeah.
is really related to it. I feel like it's more nerve-wracking to me because when you say experimental, you mean the actual whatever this particular vaccine is. That's what you mean is experimental. But what I think of when I think experimental is really what's happening is it's kind of like, this is a legit thing. You can go ahead and you can get it. What they're experimenting with is getting people to do the thing, how to get people to do the thing, how to get people to do the thing more easily. Because while this isn't a thing in the future, like, people just going along with the idea of, and this is what you have to get today, guys. This is what's on the lunch tray. Here you go. Here's your lunch. Just eat it, right? Like, I know it's very conspiratorial sounding. I know, but I mean, I don't know. I know it's bad. I know. I
want to say
went QAnon there.
No, I want to say that it's not experimental.
No, the experiment has nothing to do with the actual vaccine, is what I'm saying.
No, I know. This is what I'm saying. It isn't experimental to get people to do the thing. I mean, that's actually something that we've been doing for thousands of years, finding ways to get people to do the things. Don't masturbate, you'll go to hell. I mean, Democrats all want to destroy the country. This is something that as a species we're really good at.
I just want to bring attention to a comment from Proctor Hawk, who says, yeah, I'm not interested in more papers, please, to enjoy basic freedoms. And I see that. I understand that logic, right? But how else can you show you've got the vaccine? If you don't present something, you can't see that someone's vaccinated by looking at them. So
yeah, I don't know. And also the whole thing about the burden of proof that it's safe is on you. Well, considering I had both shots and I'm perfectly fine, I would say, you know what, burden of proof has been met. Sorry, when there's across the world millions upon millions upon millions of people have had this vaccine, and there's like the amount of bad reactions are so minuscule in comparison to the number of people who have had it. I think any argument about its efficacy and safety, they're pretty much done.
So we are the country with 500,000 people dead, right? Other countries with greater populations don't have our death count. There is a reason why. We need to start with that reason. And if part of that reason is people keep comparing our efforts to control the virus to Nazis in order to scare their own half of the country into voting down anything that it takes to control this virus, then we are killing ourselves. The rest of the world doesn't have this Nazi scare going around, like a Red Scare. They're not scared in the same way, and they're able to look at these control measures for the virus and implement them. And it's across so many different types of societies. They're not all communist China that can perform a really good lockdown. Some of them are enjoying their time at the beach right now. New Zealand looks awesome. I wish I could go. They're not going to take me because I'm an American.
Right.
The rest of the world doesn't want Americans now. We used to be afraid of, like, let's build a border wall to keep them out. Nobody wants us. We are the dirty people.
Well, places like New Zealand, though, have an advantage to being isolated, geographically.
Yeah, they used their advantages that they had.
I personally don't accept that argument with respect, because the bottom line is it's about compliance to following guidelines. If you can get your population to follow the guidelines, it doesn't matter how many people are in your population. If we started wearing masks and social distancing 2 weeks earlier, back in late February, early March, or whatever of last year, hundreds of thousands of people would not have died. That's, so it's in America, the issue is compliance, and it was exacerbated by the politicization of not just mask wearing, but whether the coronavirus was a hoax or not. At first, he was calling it a hoax for a month and a half when it was still abroad. You know what I mean? Virtually everything about the way that the previous administration handled the coronavirus suggested to me, and I've said this many times on the show, is that they wanted people to die. It's ineptitude is not a sufficient explanation for all the shit that they did to make it worse.
If I can talk shit about the country you came from, Goth, just in January, they did have the highest per capita people dying. Right? They were, person for person, the worst.
And the strongest reason for that, Michael, is over there they sort of I think maybe on purpose. I don't know. I don't like to think like this, but I mean, they let it in. There's a whole bunch of old folks' homes in Britain that are chock full of old folks. And if you let the virus into that place, it's going to just wipe out, like 60% or so, they're already toward the end of their life and have, low resistance.
Yeah. They took the mantle from the US for a little while, right? Everything's leveling off now because we've got vaccines deploying all over the world. But culturally, they're very similar to us. Boris is basically Trump Jr., right? He down to the fucked up haircut, right? So I think there's something to be said about that. When you let people lead that are incompetent, that can scare people away from science, and let anti-science run rampant, you're going to get these kind of results.
I agree. I don't know what else to say. Listen, we're coming up close to 4 hours.
I want to agree with that so much, but I don't.
Right. We're coming up for 4 hours, so I want to stop by the time to 4 hours. So if anybody has anything they've been itching to say, Kazoom, now would be a good time.
I don't I don't have anything to say, especially not just suddenly on the spot. Hey, but I'm glad I was able to make it here for at least a little while. So
yeah, you came to the most interesting part of the show, you lucky dog. I mean, it was all a bit tangled before you got here, and it was pretty much like surfing, when you were here. It was cool. Yeah. you know, and it kind of surprises me we haven't talked about dreams before. I don't recall ever talking about dreams before, which is kind of surprising since dreaming is something everybody kind of does, you know.
Like the premise of the show isn't dreams, so.
Well, anyway, I guess I'll say goodbye to the audience in the sidebar then, and thank you all for commenting, and your good humor and your patience is always appreciated, and we hope to see you again next week on The Breakfast Club. So wave to the cameras, everybody, and say goodbye.